Yeah, we're trying to figure out how we're going to get the yogurt. Everything else. That's the berries. I put in the raspberries. So she's on the sideboard. That's that. The cheese is pile on top. The cheese is eat now. Can you get a berry first down below? Yeah. I don't know about strawberries, but we might be able to get Welcome to the only 2 hours. It's a quick chill 2 hours. Quick chill. Snooze. Refrigerator off for 8 hours.
Yeah, I think it gets everything cold and then keeps it at the same temp. Oh. That's what I think it does.
What's going on with your call, Joel?
It hadn't started yet.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's 5:59.
Is there anything else that needs to go on top of that? I mean, there's cucumber in that. Yeah. Well, girls, do we want to just go and walk right there? Yeah, sure. I'm changing out of this. Okay. Yeah. It's on this. Okay. I'll be able to come back and change it like June. Oh, we have to. I just figure we don't want to stay in the room like that. I mean, we'll have to be. We don't need
You just don't want to sit here and be quiet while it's going on. Plus, I don't want people scoping crane in sports bra.
We're going to begin in a minute. There are handouts on our itinerary on the podium. I'd like to call to order our special public meeting of the Henry County Council to discuss food and beverage projects and other related issues. I'd like to start with we'll do the pledge, then we'll have prayer with one of those two arm wrestling over it. I'd like to read an opening statement that kind of summarizes the intention of tonight and the order of tonight. The purpose of tonight's public meeting is twofold. food and beverage projects and funding with question and answers, including public comments. And number 2, council members' Q&A regarding bonding options. The first 30 minutes set aside for the top 2 projects that the Food and Beverage Advisory Committee recommended for the greatest amount of funding. Those are the Basketball Hall of Fame and the Newcastle Sports Park. Will be given approximately 10 minutes each, and that includes question and answer time from council members and public comments. 6:30 to 7, we have reps from Baker Tilly and Ice Miller, and Lisa's here. Our Henry County attorney is online, and bonding questions, as well as Indiana Code 6-9-25, which affects the Henry County food and beverage and the legal requirements affecting the process. So that's between 6:30 and 7. The largest part of the night is 7 to 8:30. Most of the projects will have a chance to talk for 1 to 2 minutes each and have council member questions answered. The public will also have a chance to comment during this period. The order of the speakers is on the handout on the podium. And 8:30 to 8:45, the council will discuss their takeaways from the night's presentations and information that's gathered tonight. The Zoom is scheduled to end at 8:45, as will we. We will continue food and beverage discussions at our regular March council meeting, which is at 3:30 this Thursday, the 31st, in this courtroom. As always, the public is cordially invited then as well. We'd like to thank you ahead of time for your cordial and orderly attendance and participation tonight. Without further ado, first up is Chris May with the Basketball Hall of Fame. You provided a notebook for each member,
Yes.
right? Thank you.
Yes, the black binder has the entirety of our application through the advisory committee. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. Thanks for your attention. I don't want to necessarily go through all the details that have been covered previously, but I also don't want to leave any gaps in any questions and information that you may have. To speak to our project, if you're not familiar, we are 5 years into this plan. Like any good basketball team, any sports team, any business, there has been a plan, and this began in 2017 through our long-term planning committee. As everyone is well aware, Henry County and the food and beverage tax was originated to pay for the structure that we've occupied for 31 years, and that took a huge commitment from the community. Since then, we have taken care of all operating expenses and the cost of doing business in that museum. As the letter in the early part of your binder explains, we've outgrown our space. 31 years open to the public, exhibit space, office space, storage space. We've tapped out what we have available to us. So at the start of this plan in 2017 with our long-term planning committee, first and foremost, our board and our key stakeholders said, we're not so interested in looking elsewhere. We want to make what we have in Newcastle great, and we want to start to try to put ourselves in a position to expand. And so over the course of these 5 years, we've done a number of things. Included amongst that was a feasibility study on trying to raise dollars and break ground as early as 3 years ago. Some of the things we learned through the feasibility study have positioned us to add another full-time staff position in recent years. Our fundraising efforts through numbers of ways, whether they be corporate sponsors, annual members, donors who contribute at smaller levels, all of our fundraising efforts have grown in the recent years after adding that position. And again, it's working the plan, working the playbook, trying to get in a position to where we can expand. And included in your plan in the application, we also brought back the architect Jonathan Hess, who designed the building 30-plus years ago, still in practice. He came back, and the first thing he said was, when we built this place, we always planned there was going to have to be an expansion, and there's a flat space behind us where you can see clear as day. You know, that was expected to be the footprint, and that's really what this expansion would fill in. You can see the blueprints. In essence, this addition would add 50% to the square footage that we currently have. It is divided up amongst office space, exhibit space, and more storage space. The exhibit space is designed with flexibility and an open concept to allow us for more group settings, more meetings, more rentals, more programming where we can bring Hall of Famers, basketball folks in for Q&As or dinners or meet and greets, but also to allow for technological exhibitry. And that is obviously where we're at these days with folks addicted to their phones and their iPads and technology. These days when we go to museum conferences, it's not about adding glass cases where you can display trophies. It's about the audio, the visual, the technological that have now become the expectation in the museum experience. You also see in our packet what was presented in our feasibility study, how we positioned it, how we talked about what we were trying to do, including some of the numbers. And finally, in the back of that packet are things that we are currently doing, and this is not dependent upon an expansion. So some of the images you see right now, Section 127 is more broadly known through their corporate parent company, Sport Graphics. They do all kinds of really cool things, from Lucas Oil Stadium and Gainbridge Fieldhouse to projects like what we have going on now. So some of the things you see in that packet are ongoing and will be done in the next couple of months. We're continuing to try to improve the space we have, and we had the big renovation in early 2021. We want to continue to impress folks when they come, and with an expansion, obviously, it gives us even more to show off, even more to brag about, to promote, and we think to bring folks to Henry County. I am open to any questions at this point in time.
Council?
I have a quick question. Chris, you just mentioned the shift to more experiential AV type of experience in the hall. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. We are a member of an organization of Hall of Fame and museums from all over the world, sports particular. And so every year I go to this conference and we hear from exhibit companies and we hear from our folks that are at other institutions and museums. And again, it seems like we can't go 10 seconds without staring at this or looking at this. What we don't currently have in the Hall of Fame and what this would allow us are, we have a treasure trove of audio, of video, of photos, all kinds of things that are in storage that we can show on a limited basis in an exhibit for a little while or on this screen on, if you push this button. But when you digitize all these kinds of things, we're talking literally, we have thousands upon thousands of photos, whether they're team photos, whether it's players and coaches that are inducted, whether they're just gymnasiums filled with people. If we digitize that, on demand, you could walk in and say, hey, I'm from Shenandoah. I want to see all the photos you have from Shenandoah, or I'm interested in this player. Technology makes a lot of things available and really cool and literally at your fingertips. Again, AR and VR and all those kinds of things, you can get really, really, really expensive, and that's why we need funds for the structure, and then we have funds, and we're going to go get more funds for the exhibitry. But that's the concept of what we're trying to add and what that space would do.
That sounds great. I have an uncle who works in Canton at the NFL Hall of Fame, and he's been there for over 20 years, and I've seen that shift over there when I visit my aunt and uncle, and it's amazing what they can do. The information that's digitized can be brought up in an instant. To think that we could have that down the road would be, I think, excellent.
I don't know how many films we have that are literally canisters of film. Again, if somebody came in, we have a projector, and yes, we could rig this up, but to digitize all that and have that at someone's fingertips just opens up a whole new world.
How much money's, I re-listened to the presentation that you gave to the advisory committee, but how much would you say you have on hand and expect over the next year of being able to raise? And again, could you share the overall projected cost of what you'd like to see done in the next couple of years, this expansion project?
Certainly. A few years back, as this process was working its way out, our board committed early on at a minimum $1 million that we have existing in hand. I am one person who answers to a board, but I am here to tell you we have $2 million existing in hand, at least, right now, that would go towards this. If you look at the architect's rough costs that are 3 years old and have certainly gone up and up and up, We are in essence asking, help us build the structure. At this point, the $2 million won't even completely build the structure. So we're asking, county, help us build structure. Hall of Fame will pay for completing the structure. And then we go either have some more outside dollars or raise those outside dollars. In all, it's going to be at least a $5 or $6 million project, and $4 million of that, if it would be anything above 2, is obviously the Hall of Fames.
And how much to build the structure? Because you said an early component would be going to technology. Excluding that, the actual building, how much would that be?
Quoted in 2018 was just under 1.9. Let's call that double. It's going to be $4 million. It's going to be $4 million to build the building.
And you have two on hand.
Yes, sir.
Other questions from the council? You certainly gave us some information to study on our own, too, if there's any follow-up questions council has.
I have a question. So in the original packet here, you talked about endowing the future. So what's the plan to accomplish that as well?
That was the feasibility study. That was one of the first pieces that we put into play in this long-term planning process. So that feasibility study was floated to donors, members, inductees of the Hall of Fame. What do you think of this plan? Here's what we're trying to do. And at that point in time, we were trying to get the building built and allocate for endowed funds. What we found out, a couple of key things actually were discovered in that feasibility study. The first was, you're not ready yet. We need to deepen our fundraising capabilities, which, as I mentioned, we have done with a position, and we've had success in bringing new folks on board with dollars. The other thing we found out in that feasibility study was that obviously we're an organization that has members, donors, and stakeholders not just all over Indiana, but across the United States. And we found that there are some of our stakeholders who you would recognize, whether you're a basketball fan or not, with their businesses, et cetera, who are Indianapolis, Marion County, Hamilton County-based folks who said, quite frankly, I'm not interested in giving a penny if you expand in Newcastle, but if you come to the metro area, I got some space and let's talk. And I bring that up to say we have to be realistic about the situation and where we're at. There are folks, quite frankly, who don't think it should be in Henry County. But here we are, and as I said, the first step in our process was we want to make what we have as good as we can, and then we want to expand it. So it wasn't a, hey, let's look at what else is out there, but there have been conversations along those lines that have occurred. To get back to your question about the endowed funds, thankfully our endowment has grown over these last few years that have allowed the flexibility to operate and to allocate more dollars in this direction, not only for a match, but obviously for what it's going to take above and beyond.
Prior to COVID, what was your average annual attendance?
At the museum, it's been about 10,000 per year. What we find interesting is 50% of those visitors are not from Indiana. They don't live here. They're coming through on I-70. They saw a billboard. They saw one of the state tourism signs. They're coming to visit family. They've got other things going on, and they wanted to stop. So while I know other entities in this county draw more from a strict headcount perspective, we're bringing people from all over. And I know that part of our plan is if we can expand and do this right, we're going to advertise, promote. That becomes a part of getting this thing open and letting even more people know where we are, who we are, and what we have to offer.
I know you did a clip for our Stellar video promoting that back in 2019. So did Bob Garner from the Hoosier Gym. And he quoted a minimum of 60 to 70,000 through the Hoosier Gym. Does that include like the players and their tournaments and their coaches? I assume.
It would have to.
Yes.
It would have to.
And you don't have players playing in the basketball, so you're actually paid visitors.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions from the council?
Would you allow council members to come check out the expansion plans on site?
Absolutely. And I would say, and this thought was on my mind as well, the renovations we did early in 21, we would have loved to have had, hey, come check it all out, but COVID and what can you do, what can't you do? Obviously, this is Henry County's. I mean, we represent the state and we have folks from all over, but that's another part of what this space would allow is for meetings and rentals and other types of events, that this opens us up to even bigger audiences and more folks, and we want those to be local folks, absolutely.
You had asked for $3 million, and the recommendation from the Food and Beverage Advisory was $2 million. The amount that we're able to provide will depend on the amount of whether we bond and how much, if we bond, how much. So let's say we bond on the lower level, and we'd have to cut everybody back so many percent, perhaps. Presently, you're $2 million, which is half of the amount of the total monies if we bond at the higher amount. How much would we shave before it actually was really hurtful to the project, in your estimation?
We're close already. I know how the sausage is made, and I know budgets and how you have to try to make it all fit. We could shave a little bit, but there's not a ton of fat on that number you've got right there, very truthfully.
Any other questions, because we're going into the sports park time? If not, thank you.
Thank you very
very
much.
much, Chris, and appreciate the information and the video 10 days ago. Mayor, the sports park.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to come talk to you tonight. I gave everybody a packet. On that packet, the very first page is just an introduction. This project would bring over 100,000 people to Newcastle, Henry County a year. It is going to bring in over $1.5 to $2 million in revenue a year. This covers every sport: wrestling, football, basketball, baseball, soccer. And when I say that it entails every sport, it literally, there's not just a basketball team out there to come and play in a tournament. There's an 8-year-old team, there's a 9-year-old team, there are tournaments at every age level. So your second page, it's a layout. It would be 4 Little League diamonds. When I say Little League diamonds, that would consist from T-ball all the way up to Little League or girls softball, which would be 220-foot fences, 6 foot tall. 3 high school diamonds. The first high school diamond and the first Little League diamond would be turf, something that Newcastle doesn't have or doesn't facilitate right now. Then in the very bottom corner there, it shows 5 basketball courts. The third page is kind of how the original layout was, but because of the medical services and the physical therapy room, that entity has already outgrown that set of plans. So on page number 4, they need at least 10,000 feet. There would be in between $8,000 to $10,000 a month revenue annually that would be rented by professional services, doctors, offices, physical therapy. There would be a coffee shop, a sporting goods store in this facility. So it would have yearly income coming in all year round. The next page is literally incomes that would bring in, and that was figured with a 6,000 to 8,000 square foot medical facility. So it's already outgrown that, so that would surpass that number there. The next page is what each individual complex would cost. First of all, we've formed a management team. We've secured the land. We're in the fundraiser right now. So next thing we need to do is start laying out drainage and get the state approved plans approved. So the Little League Diamonds, just one Little League Diamond turf would be a $400,000 facility. One high school turf diamond would be $1 million facility. facility for the offices, the professional offices would be $1 million facility. Then the basketball, volleyball, wrestling, gymnastics, trampoline would be a $7.2 million, which comes to $16 million project. If you look at the very last page, this is very conservative numbers, but this provides each sport with a certain number of tournaments each weekend, every weekend. And presently, every weekend this winter, I was either at Wapahani, Delta, Muncie, Jasper, Noblesville. So, I mean, I'm taking a traveling 8-year-old team to participate in these tournaments right now. And it's not like there is just a high school team that would participate. I mean, this is every sport, every age group, every weekend. I put conservative numbers together, and there is not, let me be careful how I say this. This plan would bring and would feed food and beverage more than any project we've ever brought to Newcastle. I mean, this would create more revenue than any project that we've ever brought to feed the food and beverage income tax, or the food and beverage tax. So the last, very back page, this is Pendleton. Unfortunately, I have a set of 8-year-old twins, and I'm paying $250 to take them April 14th to Pendleton for a birthday party at a facility exactly like this. So I'm having to drive my own grandkids out of the county just to participate in a birthday party that they want to have. So this is just a letter from them. My hope is that you are able to have something like this in Newcastle, not only as an economic driver, but also as a community builder like it's been for us. It's a very simple fact that kids sports is a big business now. And if you haven't lived it, it's hard to explain, it's hard to see, it's hard to know. When you pull up to a facility and see hundreds of kids and hundreds of parents coming to the facility to participate. And we don't want this to interfere with any of our other diamonds, any of our other leagues. We want them driving into town. Instead of, if we have a large tournament one weekend, not only we have 4 diamonds out there, all of a sudden we've got 6 diamonds in here or 9 diamonds in here. We want them driving through town spending money. So this is a huge, huge income for our community, and I appreciate the opportunity just to show it to you. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Where did you get the numbers from? I mean, was there a feasibility study, for example?
Yeah, there's a feasibility study. I live this every weekend. I know what I pay the entry fees, and I know how many teams I've got. I put these numbers together myself from asking different community centers what they charge for entry fees and for people to come in. So
Okay, so this came from you and your experience,
Yes.
not an outside agency that
No.
did this professionally. Okay. And have you corresponded or communicated like with the schools? I know they're putting money into a baseball diamond out at Sunnyside. Has there been coordination in the future between local teams and?
I tried very hard for about 2 years to get something together with the schools, and they chose to do their own thing. This started out to be 4 basketball courts south of the field house, and they chose not to go that path. So this will be city-owned, just like Baker Park, just like the skate park. If these diamonds were already here, the school wouldn't be in the pickle with their high school diamond that they're in right now.
Okay.
They wouldn't be renting Shenandoah's diamond here in a couple days to play their first home game.
Yeah, I saw that's under construction still. So I'll get my thoughts there. Council, questions for the mayor as I collect my thoughts?
I have a question. So you said you were going to start with the basketball courts, and I'm trying to think, what the overhead would be to keep that office open compared to the rental income you already have from the physical therapy. Do you have any idea if that rental alone would cover lights and?
Oh, yeah. Yes, but at this time, from the last time I spoke in here, I have one turf Little League diamond financially secured and one high school turf diamond financially secured.
Could you give us an idea of the funding you already have and where it's coming from?
A little over $3 million committed.
Is this private? Is it,
Private, personal, there'll be no money borrowed on this.
okay, do you have corporate sponsorship as well?
Individual sponsorship, corporate sponsorship. If you guys offered $50 to this project, a little bit of something's better than a whole lot of nothing.
So the $3 million that you have committed is towards the basketball courts plus
No,
the new?
$1.5 million of that is to the baseball diamonds, and then $1.5 million of it is, that would be one baseball court and a white box for the professional services to finish out the inside themselves.
I'd like to see in writing the commitments. This evolved from a previous, as I was listening to your presentation. When did the Henry County Health get a major involvement in this?
When I took them to Pendleton and showed them Pendleton's facility.
And how big is it? You said that on page 3 that where it shows the basketball courts and this kind of pentagon. Yeah, it looks like
They need at least,
five-sided.
that was a little over 6,000 square feet, and they need 10,000 square feet.
So how is that done? Is the whole thing
Yeah, that
enlarged?
that changes everything. No, it goes to page 4, and it goes from an octagon to 4.
Okay. That's,
But that would give us another basketball court also.
okay, from 5 to 6.
Right.
Have you seen Pendleton's numbers? Are they profitable consistently?
Well,
Or talk to us about that.
yeah. I would say that Pendleton's and New Palestine's facilities are just alike, except New Pal has a swimming pool. And that's a cross between a YMCA open to the public. This really isn't, this is for tournaments. This is for weekend tournaments or Thursday, Friday, Saturday tournaments. So they're based on daily patrons coming in, wanting to play corkball or wanting to play tennis, but this isn't centered towards that. This is in no competition with the YMCA, with our local YMCA. This is centered around tournaments. So this would be open for rent for birthday parties. You kind of have to see the facilities that they have rentable for. You get it for 2 hours for $250, and when your 2 hours is up, you better be ready to move out because somebody else is coming in. I mean, it's just, I estimated that there would be at least 4 tournament or 4 rental parties a weekend. You know, they are literally closing their daily trampoline and walk-in business because their parties surpass their income for their private parties.
Mayor, I know a lot of these tournaments are overnight. We also have a lack of hotels, in our county, and I know there's development coming down the line. What are we going to do about that? Is that...
Well, we've already got, we're close as we've ever been to having a new motel, a brand name motel at 3 and 70. They're working on it extremely, layouts, land acquisitions right now. I mean, it's in the works right now.
So do you think with that, this can sustain the overnight traffic we would have?
Well, yeah, and it's the chicken or the egg. The motels want to see restaurants and events, and the restaurants want to see a motel, but I would say the majority of the tournaments that I drive, anywhere from an hour to hour and a half every weekend, back and forth. Yes, it would be nice to have a couple motels. So there's no doubt about that, but one's going to feed the other.
Sure. And this isn't a question for you so much as my colleagues and maybe Lisa, but given that we might have, you said 100,000 visitors in county a year?
At least. That's conservative.
Sure. And I'm thinking about food and beverage and how that might impact positively the food and beverage fund, replenishing it. Do we have any, maybe it's impossible to figure that, but I'm curious what the impact might look like. Can anybody in the room answer that?
Without trying to get too personal, Corey Murphy went to Noblesville this weekend. 2 days or 3 days? 2 days. And spent over $300 in Noblesville. Did you stay over there or did you drive back and forth?
So we really might see our food and beverage. I mean, I know all projections we've seen have been conservative from Ice Miller, but we really might see incredible return on investment there.
If you're a coach, unfortunately, there could be a morning game and then a mid-afternoon game, and there's 3 or 4 hours in between. For food and beverage, that's the good part, that they've got to drive in and get something to eat.
Right now, this is on Henry County property. What do you envision happening? I mean, have you conferred with any county officials, commissioners, the planning commission? Because this is being advertised as the Newcastle Sports Park. So has there been any kind of coordination between the two entities?
Well, the coordination is we're giving the county about $3.54 million of water and sewer from Stonegate up 103 to 300 to Walmart, where actually it's to Duke Energy, which is going to allow you guys to build houses right and left on both sides of 103 that goes in your pocket, not the city's, immediately.
Let me clarify your question, Ken. You said county property, or is this in the county?
It's in the county.
The county does
Thank
not
you.
own this property.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure I
It's in
misunderstood.
the county.
Thank you.
Unless it's annexed, and I've heard you say you're not going to do any more annexing, so,
It's not contiguous.
okay. You've signed up for READY, for the infrastructure, the water, sewer from, I believe, Walmart down 300 to this site. What if you don't get READY?
It's going to happen anyway.
How does that happen? How is that funded?
2 or 3 different ways. There are other opportunities, at least 3 other vehicles to make that happen. My goal is to not annex anybody, but if our county wants to grow, we have to expand water and sewer for industry and for homes both. Being laid back is about as nice as I can say it. It's costing us daily by not being able to grow at a rate because we don't have water and sewer to 150 acres that land can be developed to build a house on. So all this walks hand in hand. All this fits together. I mean, it's not just a sports complex. This has a huge, huge emphasis on how this is going to let our county grow population-wise also.
We hope so. That would be nice. Any other questions for the mayor?
You said this is for weekend tournaments and things like that. Do you anticipate, if that goes well, then in the future possibly having full-time activities where people can go to the gym, work out, or a bunch of guys can get together, rent the space to play basketball, or?
Well, there's 2 answers to that. And the first answer is the medical facility will be open during normal working hours. The high school, Newcastle High School, presently, and there's a Shenandoah team that rents the armory to practice in. Our Newcastle freshmen practice in the armory for the last 4 years. It would be available for teams to rent through the week, but it wouldn't be open to the public. So the second part of your question is, if somebody just wants to go shoot around, they need to go buy a membership at the YMCA. But it would be for teams to rent the baseball diamond and the gyms and the gymnastics. It will have a full-scale cheerleading, so we'll be able to have cheerleading competition. And it's scary for me to think that the past few years, the largest event in our field house has been cheerleading and dance competition. I mean, it's not just the cheerleaders and their parents. They bring their aunts, their uncles, their cousins. Unless you've lived it, you have no idea how many people coming through our county we're passing up.
Okay.
I have a question. Oh, were you gonna?
No, go ahead. I'm just trying to get to Jason because he has to get off before
Okay.
7, but go ahead.
Can you, without being negative possibly, can you compare this to the sports complex that is in the process of being built at the expo? What makes this model more successful? Because they're very similar. As I'm hearing some of these things, bringing people in, hosting sporting events, I'm just thinking.
I didn't know there was going to be any sports at the expo, and the building that they have now, it's going to have less than a 10-foot tall ceiling. A basketball goal is 10 foot tall. So
Right.
I don't know what the existing building that's there now, I don't know what sports they could have. So that's the only way I know how to answer that question.
Right.
Anything else? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Kenneth,
Sure.
I had one more question.
Go
Mayor,
ahead, Kyle.
with Grad Park in Westfield, I think it's up for sale. Has there been any discussion with any of the leadership up there to see, what bumps in the road they've had, the pros, the cons, anything from a futuristic standpoint?
Talked to Mayor Cook numerous times. They should have went to a hospital and leased a facility out to a hospital and got the support from landing someone there that would have annual income. I'm not looking at 32 soccer fields, 32 baseball diamonds. We're going to build this that what fits our needs, that we can draw from. I don't want to draw teams from Canada, Phoenix. This is not about national champs. This is going to be for teams that are trying to build a team to get to a state tournament. So I think they overbuilt, and they should have looked at annual income secured. So they have a facility that has under roof 3 indoor soccer fields. So there's. Well, let's look at their tax base. Do we want to compare tax bases there, Lisa? So, I'm not looking at anything like that at all. So.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate
Thank you.
it very much.
Thank you.
Do we have Jason on the phone? Can he? Okay, what we have Jason Simler from Baker Tilly. He's our bonding expert. We have Lisa Lee in the audience from Ice Miller. She can help us with both bonding and questions relating to the Indiana Code affecting food and beverage in Henry County. And I believe we have our county attorney, Joel. Let's start with Jason. Questions for Jason. So you can speak, Jason, and we hear you?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
You're in Sullivan County, I understand.
That's correct. Hello, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there in person tonight.
Okay. I think there are some questions left over from the last meeting about to bond or not to bond, and if so, what level? And I'm going to turn it over to council members with questions because you are the expert in that domain.
Jason, could you explain to everyone how this bond would be issued differently than previous food and beverage bonds?
Yeah. Right now, the county has 2 food and beverage bonds outstanding. They have the bonds that were 2012 and 2015. Both of those bonds have your food and beverage revenue that you're currently receiving pledged towards those annual payments with a property tax backup. What that property tax backup means that if for some reason the food and beverage doesn't come in as anticipated, and you don't have any and you don't have sufficient food and beverage revenues, the county could use some other revenues. If it doesn't have any other revenues at its exposure, then it'd be required to put in a new property tax levy in place to cover that shortfall. We've structured the bonds in the past where you've had sufficient revenues from food and beverage, where you've not had to use any other revenues of the county, and have not had to put that property tax levy in place. Really, that property tax levy, as we talked about with the jail project, it's really there just for marketability, to allow us to get the lowest interest rate on the bonds as possible. Again, so those are the two bonds that you have outstanding. What's being discussed with these bonds, if you decide to go forward, was to have the bonds payable from general revenues of the county. So it's basically any revenues that the county has, including food and beverage. So each year, when the county council does its budget, it would make a determination what revenue it would like to use to make the bond payments. We would structure the bonds and size the bonds in the fashion that there would be sufficient food and beverage to cover not only the outstanding bonds, but these new bonds. Again, you could use additional revenues or other revenues of the county, but the intent would be to use food and beverage that you are currently receiving. And then we'd also recommend that you'd also have a property tax backup on these bonds, again, just for marketability to allow you to get the lowest interest rate possible.
Susan and I were on a conference call with you and Lisa because we had some questions and concerns. You were indicating that you're working with a jail in Sullivan County, and their construction management firm is saying to anticipate a 1% inflation increase per month on that project. Is that correct?
Yeah, they just received bids on their jail project. They're looking at building a brand new jail, just like you guys have recently done, and bids came in 11% higher than anticipated. So we're looking at options right now, and they'd ask their architect and engineer if they were to wait and try to rebid this fall, what would be an assumption to make as far as what bids they'd received then if they waited. And he said right now, and what he sees for the foreseeable future is a 1% increase each month in construction costs. That's how he's doing his estimates.
What's the advantage of bonding versus not bonding under this current inflationary climate?
Well, and you usually bond when you don't have cash on hand and you're willing to fund your projects immediately and not have to wait for your revenue to accumulate over years. So, the benefit of bonding is you're paying for projects at today's cost versus cost from 6 months, 9 months, a year from now. So based upon what the engineer is telling us, things are cheaper now than they will be in the future. Also, interest rates. I think I've been telling the county for years that interest rates are eventually going to increase. I've been telling you that for about 10 years. So I think finally I'm right. Interest rates are starting to increase, and we're predicting interest rate hikes, another 5 or 6 here in the next 12 months potentially. So interest rates are increasing. So if you're going to bond, the sooner you can bond, the cheaper the money will be.
What was the rate again of the updated that you gave us about two and a half weeks ago? What was the interest rate that document update was based on?
Oh, it ranged from 1.85% to 3.9%. So it's probably about 3% on average over 20 years.
And that had gone up since last August.
Yes. Yeah.
Questions from the council for Jason?
Jason, what is the downside or the pitfalls of going with this type of bond versus the bonding that we had done on the previous 2 food and beverage, where we're using general fund monies instead of just committing the food and beverage funds?
There's really, from administrative standpoint, there's really no difference. I mean, it's really giving you more flexibility by doing this way, because your other two bond issues, you actually pledged your food and beverage. Here, you're just, using any general revenues of the county, but not specifically pledging it. Both bonds have the property tax backup, which provides us the most marketability. But really the only difference is, one, you're pledging food and beverage. But even though, like I said, the two bonds outstanding that you pledged food and beverage, you still legally could use any other revenues of the county if you chose to. These bonds, we're just not legally pledging it.
So it doesn't hurt our potential future borrowing or any other options that this council may have in the future, since we're obligating the general fund monies?
No, I mean, both, if you pledge food and beverage or just general revenues, both will count against your debt limit. So there's no distinguishing between the two there.
We also have Lisa here, who I know has information as well, because she shared it on the phone call today.
Hi, Jason. Yes, Lisa
Hi, Lisa.
Lee with Ice Miller. Generally serve as bond counsel to the county and various bodies in the county. Yeah, the difference here, Councilman Malakote, is that the two outstanding bonds, as Jason mentioned, were issued in 2012 and 2015. There have been numerous amendments to this statute over the years. I think it started in around 1987. The Hall of Fame may be able to confirm that. But since that time, there's been numerous different amendments. And in 2016, there was an amendment that has muddied the waters, I would say, from a legal perspective. If you probably ask 10 different bond counsel, you might get 10 different answers. But from our perspective, looking at the amendments in 2016, the amendments in 2021, and kind of the current climate with respect to food and beverage and how the legislature feels about it, which we can talk about more in a moment, our opinions committee is not comfortable with a direct pledge of food and beverage to the bonds. We're very comfortable that you can absolutely use food and beverage to pay for the debt service if you choose to budget it in your budget cycle. But we would also issue the bonds under the county's general borrowing statute, which is the same borrowing statute that applies to every county in Indiana. So it's not a specific special legislation specific to Henry County. It's a general borrowing statute. So we're comfortable that we could give an unqualified opinion, which is what is required by the market when you're going to issue bonds under the general borrowing statute. And using the structure, general revenues of the county would be the pledge with the intent to use food and beverage. And then again, in your budget cycle each year, you could actually commit the food and beverage and budget it through that so that it is committed to pay that debt service, and you're not looking at other general revenues of the county.
So from a legal perspective then, Lisa, are we operating under the food and beverage statute? Or are we operating outside of that?
With respect to the issuance of bonds, you would be operating under the general borrowing statute, not the food and beverage statute.
So how about the awards of the funds then? Would they be operating under the general statute or the food and beverage statute?
No, they would be operating under everything else would be under the food and beverage statute. Your food and beverage funds are absolutely available to pay for these types of projects. It's just that it's, with the amendments, it's too unclear for us to be on the hook as bond counsel for 20 years and give an unqualified opinion that it wouldn't be subject to potential challenge. Whereas we can
seems very
absolutely
convoluted
do
to
that.
me. I mean, it seems...
It is a legal, it's a legal issue. But we can absolutely give an unqualified opinion under the general borrowing statute, and we're very comfortable with that.
So you're very
would I say
comfortable
that
with bonding?
We're very comfortable that you can bond and that you can budget your food and beverage revenues to pay the debt service.
So like Chad was saying, even though we're going to do a general bond or general revenue bond, when we use food and beverage monies, we still have to follow the statute for food and beverage monies.
Absolutely. Yes.
But see, we're making that decision to pay the bill and that's done on a yearly basis in an annual budget. See, that's where it gets very convoluted for me, because we're not actually awarding the funds directly from the food and beverage. We're paying a bill through the general fund which we don't do currently. We don't budget food and beverage monies in our annual budgets. That's outside of the norm.
I think the auditor probably takes care of that line item, and you don't have to actually discuss it in your meetings.
We
because
have
it's
obligated,
irrevocably pledged.
yeah, we have obligated dollars that we put in there, but we don't go in and actually
Sure.
manage
you
and
could
budget
do,
those funds.
And what I would recommend that you do, if you decide to bond or not bond, if you decide to do pay-as-you-go, whatever projects you decide to approve, I would absolutely approve a resolution that commits those funds to pay for those projects. The way that you're going to actually pay for them, though, it would be through paying the debt service on the general revenue bonds. But you could absolutely adopt a resolution that commits the funds, because I don't think these folks could go and get their other committed funds if they don't have a formal commitment from the council to spend this certain amount of money on that project.
So if we don't do this, we're stuck at 1.2, which is the amount we have on hand, well, plus a little bit more because we've had some more come in the last year. So
Right, you're not leveraging those funds over time.
Right, and we're not getting ahead of the interest rates and the 1% construction inflation per month as we would if we took care of a bid now versus a bid in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. That may be 30, 40% more than what it would be in 2022. Am I thinking correct? We're kind of hedging inflation by committing now to a project versus pay as you go.
Well, yeah, as Jason mentioned, if you leverage this and bond now, you're going to lock in certain interest rates, hopefully before they get too high, and you're going to go ahead and start doing those projects, and you're going to pay the construction costs based on bids in 2022, not bids in 23 and late 23 and 24 and 25 and those types of things.
So the risk, is it any riskier to do it now than it would have been 3-5 years ago when they bonded with food and beverage? No difference as far as risk factor.
As far as to bond or not bond, no, I would say that the difference, there is no difference in bonding or not. Bonding back then versus bonding now, it's the same scenario, but now you're, as Jason said, he's finally right, and interest rates are going up and construction inflation is going up, so deciding to do nothing but pay as you go may have some cost, will certainly have some cost risk.
Jason, I know you have to jump off here pretty soon for your meeting down there, but impact on taxpayers, either way. Any?
No, I mean, you're not going to be increasing any tax rates. You're going to be paying the bond payment if you decide to go forward on existing revenues that you're collecting. So there won't be any new tax or any additional tax on taxpayers.
Jason, do you know the percentage of coverage on the previous two bonds that were issued? I don't have those with me this evening.
After they were issued?
Well, no, you did the assumed 125% and assumed 150% calculation on these. I think it was probably 125% or less on those other two. Is that correct?
No, it would have been at least 125% to meet parity. So I was thinking it's beyond maybe 135%. I'd have to look that up, but it was greater than, it was 125 or greater.
Right, when the 2015 bonds were issued, the additional bonds test to be payable on the same basis would have been at least 125. I don't have that in front of me. So you would have had at least 125% coverage in 15 for both bonds, based on then what you were bringing in.
And we weren't at risk any time since then of falling short.
No, and that's why you've been able to accumulate the 1.2 million over time, is because you've had more than enough revenue coming in to make your bond payments.
At 125 or 150, you feel comfortable, or you wouldn't have given us document if you didn't feel comfortable.
Right. And really, and as I mentioned earlier, to get to that 25 or 150% coverage, I used the average from 2016 to 2020. The average revenue that you collected during that period was $614,000. Last year, you collected over $750,000 in revenue.
And you viewed that as an outlier, I think, at the last time we spoke, that other counties were.
Yeah, I mean,
experiencing
hopefully
increases
that trend continues, but I didn't want to count on that, so I tried to be conservative and use the last 5 years average,
So everything
excluding last year's revenue.
Well, you gave us 2.5 weeks ago. You would feel every measure you used to make those calculations were on the conservative side. I mean, the bottom would have to drop out of everything for you to feel uncomfortable with either one of those.
Yeah, there'd have to be a substantial change in restaurants and people attending there in Henry County for you to see a large decrease and not be able to make your bond payments.
You probably have to leave now, don't you, Joel? You said you had a 7 o'clock meeting and you're not inside the building.
Oh.
You have to leave. You have to leave.
Oh no, I have a few more minutes if you need me to stay.
Other questions for Joel before he has to scurry into his second meeting? Jason. Yes, and Joel's on the line. We need to ask him something. Jason, I'm sorry. Any other questions for Jason?
Jason, can you verify for me and get back to us on those assumed coverages when you get an opportunity,
Yeah.
please? Or Lisa may have that information at your office as well. So
I would have it for the 2015, but he would have it current, so.
Okay, thank you.
Jason, enjoy your next meeting.
Well, thanks. If there's anything else that you need or any additional questions come up after I jump off, feel free to email me or call me tomorrow.
I think everybody up here has your number and email. Thank you.
Thanks.
Joel sent us a letter from you, Lisa, that I didn't read until about 3 days ago when I got back in town, dated March 23rd. What's this about? As we discussed, and I think this was in the conference call in Joel's office about 2 weeks ago, that section 9.5, subsection B9, contains a catch-all provision for projects for which the county decides after July 1st, 1994, to expend these revenues after the projects described in subdivisions 1 through 8 have been funded. I believe the argument can be made that so long as projects 1 through 8 are either operational or receive some funding with other projects that are funded, that condition is met. And I think that was alluded to because the expo was added, I believe, by Representative Tom Saunders in 2021. Can you explain what this all means?
Yeah, when the original statute was enacted, and then I think some of those amendments that I've talked about since then, there is in section 9.5, there's an enumeration of projects, 1 through 8, and there are various different projects that I believe have been funded over the years. And so we had in the past years, in 2012 and 2015, when you were considering projects, that catch-all in section 9 basically says that after the projects in subdivisions 1 through 8 have been funded, you can use food and beverage revenues for any projects that after this July of 94, the county determines they want to use and are proper uses of food and beverage taxes. And I think for years and years it had been understood that 1 through 8 had been funded, and some were fully operational, some had been funded, some may have then gone by the wayside after that and were no longer in play. But then in 2021, in subsection 8, the words Expo Center was added between Community Park and Cultural Center in section 8. And again, that comes before the catch-all in 9 that allows you to then determine other projects that you want to fund. So the discussion was, and from a very technical legal perspective, it looks like the intention was that some portion of the Expo Center would be funded at the same time or prior to other projects. That's just a legal interpretation. The word funded is not defined. There's nothing in there that would make me believe that it means operational, fully funded and operational. But it does say funded in some fashion. So we believe there's a reasonable argument that to the extent that the Expo Center receives some funding, some level of funding from these projects, that you have met that criteria or that condition, and you can fund other projects as well. That's basically where that comes from. But again, that's a very recent change in 2021.
And some funding is open to a wide
Absolutely
interpretation.
Certainly does.
Well, you can't help us any more than some funding is required for the expo.
Not really. I mean, that's, I think it's a local decision, and you could dance on the head of a pin all night long on what that really means. Does it mean $1? Does it mean fully funded and operational? Somewhere in between. Again, if you ask 10 different lawyers, you're going to get 10 different answers.
Go ahead.
Chad and I were speaking for quite a while about this today. You're not saying to us you need to give X number of dollars, but if we came to you and said this is our proposal, at that point would you say yes or no? I think that
I think I could tell you whether or not I believe you have a legal argument that you have met that condition, and
if we actually come to you with something, some theoretical idea.
Well, here's my concern. And again, I'm not an attorney. I'm just someone who thinks logically. When I go down through this list, sanitary, sewers, and water treatment, there's only about how many of those projects we're currently potentially looking at in this county? Does that mean that we have to give each one of those projects a certain amount of money? Then you go down to drainage or flood control. Again, we can bring Steve over and he can give us a whole bunch of drains that are getting worked on this year in this county. Do we have to give each one of those things money? Road improvements. We can bring Joe Copeland in here. And I promise you, Joe's got a whole bunch. I promise you, we can go talk to Lee in the city, and he's got plenty. And, we can call the other municipalities around, and I'm certain they're working on roads somewhere. Covered horse arena is listed on this sheet. And I know that they have also asked for funds. When you go down through here, this is a mess, to put it mildly, because where do you draw the line? Because it doesn't actually say the Newcastle Henry County Expo Center. It just says, if you read it, it says a community park, Expo Center, and cultural center. It spells it out in a very general term. So is the mayor's idea of a sports park, is that an expo center? Is that a community park? Because it's owned by the city, and he said it was going to be exactly like Baker Park. So, this is a very, very poorly written statute from our legislature. I'm going to put that on record. Did you write that down, Debbie? This is a very, very poorly written statute because it doesn't really spell out anything. Because if we go down through the list, we might as well throw this thing away. That Corey and Landon and the rest of their team so diligently worked on, because we have to meet, there's God knows how many projects that fall under those first 8 on this list.
Well, if I might say, it might not be logical, but I can say that if you've funded one sewer project or one road or one drainage ditch, you have met those conditions. The Expo Center was just recently added. So that gives it a little more, and it's...
But this county
How
gave
many
the
Expo
Expo
Centers
Center
would there be?
$1.2+ million.
Was it out of food and beverage?
It was out of the general fund, and this money's going to be coming technically in that aspect. So was it or was it not funded? Because the county gave the Expo $1.2+ million already.
Well, this is out of food
If
and
that
beverage.
is the local decision that it's been funded, then I think you can say you've met the condition.
Would you support that if we said we gave 1.2 from a general obligation bond Do you feel that that meets the spirit of this statute?
I think you could have a reasonable argument that if you have put that kind of money into the expo center, that you have met that condition.
I'm sorry, I know we're putting you on the spot, but this is, as you can imagine, it's very confusing for us non-legal folks, and I can't imagine how confusing it is for you.
Right. As I said, it's a muddy statute.
That's putting it nicely.
Hey, Joel, legal person on the phone, we're phoning a friend.
Yes,
You're a legal person, I do believe. We pay you
I am.
purpose.
He's an illegal, no.
What's your thoughts on the issues that Chad brought up?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with Lisa's interpretation that, I guess the only thing that, obviously it's not a well-written statute. The only thing that I guess would lead me to think there has to be some funding toward an expo center, and certainly I think you could make the argument you previously did, would be the recent change in what's going on in the ground. I mean, if you look at it in a vacuum, you could certainly say, yeah, you could call something an expo center. You also have, though, the fact that there was that project that's been initiated since that statute or before that statute was amended. But I don't disagree with anything Lisa said.
Did we record what Lisa said?
She said, we get to make a tough decision, is what she said.
Yeah.
And then she has to defend it.
Right. So I also heard Susan say we might come up with a recommendation that you can give your stamp of we can support this or go back to the drawing board before we support it, or somewhere in between.
Honestly, that does not have, well, I guess it does. Yeah, I would have to look at giving a reasoned opinion on that if you asked me to determine whether or not your plan meets the conditions of the statute since amended in 2021. That's how I would have to look at it and give you my thoughts on that.
And Joel did not disagree with anything you said. Does that sound like an attorney?
It
He
does.
did not disagree
I
with
don't
anything
disagree
that
with
you
that.
shared with us.
It's different than I agree with that. It's I don't disagree with that.
It's a second cousin to I agree with
It's a
everything she
second.
said. Okay.
Exactly. It's a hedge.
Okay. Any other questions for Lisa? I think Kyle may have a question.
Lisa, to paraphrase, you could kill several birds with one stone as far as a project goes. Let's just take the first two off the checklist from the statute: sanitary sewers and wastewater treatment facilities, drainage, flood control. Let's hypothetically, we're doing a sports park. Let's say there was funding for that. Would we need to specify with the allocation, if the sports park was built, that that money was tied towards the sanitary improvements that are necessary, the wastewater treatment? It's just...
No, I don't think so. Again, those projects were put in there to fund, I don't know if they were to fund certain things, but they were to authorize those types of projects. So again, I think if you've funded one sanitary sewer improvement over the years of the statute and one road improvement and one wastewater or waterworks improvement, you've met the conditions of that statute. You can't possibly, I could not read that to say you have to fund all sanitary sewer projects that need to be done with food and beverage, or all waterworks and those types of things. So I have to read it as, have you funded something in that category with that, except for those categories that are very specific. And then, correct.
This 9.5 was written in 1994. We'd have to go back and study what food and beverage maybe went to number 1, 2, 3. I mean, 4
I
covered
don't
horse
think
arena.
so. You have, in 2012 and 2015, you issued bonds under the catch-all number 9. Those bonds were not challenged. They couldn't be challenged now. I think you could make the argument, you had met all of those 1 through 8 at one point. The problem being that in 2021, there was an amendment to add something to that list. That's the only one that I think there's any question on.
Okay, so the council's going to have to do some homework, come up with something, and before you do your accept stamp, you're going to comment, right? Correct?
Sure. Yes.
Okay, thank you. We probably need to move on, council. Thank you for coming from, I'm guessing, Indianapolis to here to confirm that this is a confusing piece of legislation. Next on the agenda, we have representatives from the Saddle Club, Osborne Park, the Little League. First, I have Saddle Club. If you're welcome to come up, Rebecca. And I think most of us have read the handout that Corey gave us, which was your application online, and most of us should have looked at the video of your previous presentation. So if you can give us a short synopsis and allow some Q&A.
With over the 200 members that we have, I'm sorry, I guess I was doing that wrong. With over the 200 members that we have, there's at least 5 to 10 people that are using that facility every single day. Most of the shows are on the weekends. We do have some 4- and 5-day shows in June and August and September. And so I don't know if you've seen the economic impact that we did. We do use the AQHA standard, which is the largest horse association in the world. They did lower it down. It was 3.4 people per day per horse. On average, we rent about 5,000 to 6,000 stalls per year, but we only count the number of horses in the stalls, not the tax stalls. So we did a lot of work on driving it down to the number of horses. And since they lowered that, we did go back and do it. But 2021 was a total of around 8,532 people, and that does not include the people using the facility every day. And it does not include the clinics that we have, which have 20 to 30 people, along with 25 days of 4-H, which is 40 to 50.
Could you provide that information? Because what Corey provided at our last meeting was just your online application.
Yeah, we have the economic surveys, which we provide to the EDC every year, and all the other groups, the Chamber of Commerce, we provide this to them every year.
Is that something you could route to me and I could share with the other members?
Sure, I can send you the packet. I didn't know if you received the entire packet that I sent to the Food and Beverage Tax.
I think the only
Committee.
thing we got was your online application.
Okay.
And not the supporting
So anyway,
materials.
if you take just the show days, not including the 4-H days and clinic days, that equates to 30,000 people. Because since we have over 300 days of use right now, just from April to October, by building this additional arena, that we anticipate we'll add 8 shows in the first year that we have that done, because we have 8 on a waiting list. We should be able to open the 1st of March. Just this last weekend, the mayor came out. We spent a whole day putting up tarps so that we could have a horse sale last weekend with over 800 people in that arena. And we couldn't have done it. I mean, with the weather that it was, we could not have had that last weekend if we hadn't have put up those tarps on the sides.
I'm not wanting to cut you short, but there's 3 people and
Yeah.
we're way behind.
But I did want to say one thing.
Okay.
Our original request was $273,000.
Right.
$16,000 was already committed to the Saddle Club to do a lot of work ourselves. And then the board asked us if we could do with less, what would we take out? And we said that we would take out $80,200 and adding 30 stalls. Those 30 stalls were built in 1970s, and that was the reason why we were putting them in there. And those 30 stalls would be built by a local contractor company called QFI that employs a lot of people. And so having those 30 stalls in this also helps a lot of local businesses. And all of the quotes, everything that is on our quote is to be done local.
Very good. And at the Middletown meeting, you'd indicated 192,927. Is that still something you could live with?
Yeah, that's the amount without the stalls.
Okay.
But with the inflation rates, I think building this at $192,000 without the stalls is going to be a huge challenge.
Well, I know your project came to number 1 from the Food Advisory Committee. So any questions from the council?
I just did want to ask something, and you can verify this. In 2020, with the COVID, Applebee's, Steve Alford Inn, I talked to several other restaurants and stuff, but especially Steve Alford Inn called and said, "Are you guys going to get to open?" We worked very hard to be able to open, because had we not opened, they may have shut down.
I can see that happening, yes.
And so we do have a huge impact on our restaurant and hotel business in Henry County.
You have a lot of people. When the wind's in the right direction, I can hear every announcement over the intercom a mile and a half away. It's interesting. It's busy all the time. Questions for Rebecca? Somebody's reaching for a microphone. Kyle?
Would this facility be capable of being used at all during the fair?
It is used during the fair. We have, the Saddle Club provides 4-H Camp Week. All of 4-H is able to come over there and camp. For the 4-H Horse and Pony, the Saddle Club does daily breakfast and lunch, and we provide professional horsemen to come in to do training for them. And you mean to be used during the fair?
Yeah, or the new portion, the new indoor facility, would it be available with what you're already doing during fair time?
By adding more things for the, I'm not, No, because we're not really set up. And if we brought in other livestock such as cattle and pigs, I don't know if you've ever seen a horse that smells a pig. They usually run. And so we would like to make it, to do as much as we can over there for 4-H, but we also have a show that occurs right before the 4-H week starts. That's been there, this will be their 53rd year, the Indian and Walking Horse Association for that weekend, and there's not any other weekend we could put them, but if 4-H needed us to help with some other things, then we would be glad to help them with some other things, but adding other livestock to that facility would be detrimental to the horse shows.
So 4-H Horse and Pony, where do they participate at?
At our Horse and Pony
That's what I thought.
is all Saddle Club, and they have the facility for around 20 to 25 days free per year. We also allow them to collect all the camping. They charge for the stalls. We allow them to keep all of those funds. We don't charge them for that either, as a fundraiser for them. And like I said, we do free clinics for them that 4-H Horse and Pony can attend at a cost to the Saddle Club of around $25,000 annually for 4-H Horse and Pony that the county doesn't have to provide for that section of 4-H.
Any other questions? Because otherwise I'm going to ask Osborne Park and the Little League to come up. Thank you very much.
Thank
Said
you
you were
very
number
much.
one on their ranking, so we noted that.
Ready for me?
And your Little League.
Yes. I'm Katie Nelson, and I am the treasurer of Newcastle Little League and have been the person writing this grant, doing the presentation, the whole thing. And to add, we tied for first with the Saddle Club. Just want to put that one in there. You don't honor ties in baseball, but let's honor the tie here. Just to give you a synopsis of our project, we have between 2019, 2020, and finished up last year, we have renovated our upper diamond. That would be the one that's across from the first aid station. We did that through lots of years of saving and grant writing and in-kind donations and every other possible way to get that project done. Now we are looking to renovate the lower diamond, which is the one that's on the corner of Main and I. We're asking for $150,000 for that project. I went and ML Taylor Construction, local company, did an updated bid for me so that I knew where we were in 2022 construction costs, and their bid came in at $155,800, so we were pretty close on what we asked for versus how much the project's going to cost. Our diamond is almost 60 years old, so we have a facility that's in need of updating and renovating. To throw some numbers at you, because that seems to be the theme of the evening, if you're looking at children from Henry County, currently we have 449 players ages 4 through 12 signed up for our league this year, and we play games 6 days a week, and that brings out parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and by the time those games are done, they're tired, they don't want to go home and cook, they're going to go out to eat and generate food and beverage tax money. We are currently slated to host the 2022 12U state tournament, which is one of the feeder tournaments for the Little League World Series. We are slated to have 13 players in town for 10 teams over a 3 to 5 day time period, depending on when they're eliminated from the tournament. Using numbers, I think she said something about generated $140 in revenue. So of those 130 families that will be here for at least 3 days, if they spend $140 a day, you're looking at $18,200. And over a 3 day time period, that would be $64,600. We've currently booked the Steve Alford for that entire tournament, so that we're trying to keep as many families as we can here in Henry County. We're working with Henry County Tourism to same thing. Keep them here, keep their money here while they're in town for that tournament, as much as we possibly can. We don't have the hotel space for every team, but we're going to try and keep as many of them in town as we can.
When we get that new hotel, that'll help a lot of these projects.
Yes,
So we're all
definitely.
crossing our fingers and saying a little prayer that comes to fruition. Questions?
The other thing I would like to add very quickly is if you grant us $150,000, that will complete the project. We have never come in front of city council, county council, anyone, and asked for money to sustain our diamonds. This is the first, and it will be the last, because we know that that amount of money will complete the project and, you know, hopefully have a facility that'll last another 50 to 60 years.
You have funds on hand for that extra 5,000,
Yes.
for example? And
Yes, yes.
how much more do you have on hand if we have to cut?
Our board is willing to commit 10,000,
Okay.
just from our general fund.
Okay.
We have in-kind donations lined up to cover the demolition cost and the haul-off cost.
Okay.
Excavating if we need to do that. But this would give a Henry County contractor, you know, the green light to complete the project for us.
Okay. Questions? I stand corrected. It's tied for number one. On my list, it was 1, 2. I didn't have any ties, but okay.
If you look at the scoring, that's where you see the tie. I'm a numbers person.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And hi, Mike.
Hello.
You're
My name's-
Osborne Park?
Yep, I'm Mike Burgum, the Newcastle Parks and Recreation Superintendent, and I'm here tonight to give you some more information on the Osborne Park Softball Revitalization Program. I don't know if anybody saw our presentation on YouTube. I don't know how in-depth you would like for me to go to revisit some of those facts, figures, and options, but simply within our name of the project, revitalization is exactly what we want to try to do. We've done a lot of things at Osborne Park and within the community in the parks to upgrade facilities, make them usable, make them playable. This is one more step in that process to be able to make this facility nice, playable, usable, and attractive. Right now, there's a new board within the softball program, and that's kind of revitalized, again, kind of the effort and the stuff that's going on and the excitement within youth softball in Henry County. Josh Estel was part of the presentation a couple weeks ago with me. Since releasing their calendar and having their sign-ups, there's approximately 450 softball players that have been enrolled in the program. Josh has mentioned that on the calendar they practice 4 nights a week on all 4 diamonds, and once they get into game season, they'll be playing 4 and sometimes 5 nights a week on those facilities. If you've been to the facility, you understand why revitalization is necessary. It's run down. There hasn't been a lot of attention paid to it. In probably the past 20 or 30 years, we've probably put a Band-Aid approach on fixing some of those things. The softball board in the past has done a few projects, lights, scoreboards, some drainage that has helped keep the facility afloat, and that's duly noted because they spent some of their money doing that, fundraising, and just making sure that the fields are playable. What we want to do is take it to the next level. Make it attractive, make it safe, make it playable for all softball players and participants in Henry County. It's basically a facelift. The facility that's there right now will just be kind of turned over. Things aren't really moving. We're going to build within our budget. Old fence coming down, new fence going up, better, probably stable dugouts, shade structures, pathways, just things that will make the facility attractive. Right now, if you drive out there, unfortunately, it's probably not that attractive. Some of the things that we've done out at Osborne Park in the last 3 or 4 years, new playground equipment, the Ted Fitzgerald Trail, some other things. We planted 45 or 50 trees, taken out 45 or 50 trees. That place is looking better every single day. We're excited about making this aspect, that facility, a better aspect of the facility as well in the park. I probably could go on for a while if need be. I can stop and ask for any questions.
Questions for Mike. I think most of us have looked at the video, so this is kind of a Reader's Digest summation of the high points. Council? For Mike Burgum. Osborne, you came in number 9, but you had the third highest request, 300, and it looks like the recommendation from the advisory was 200,000. The project was 400,000. You have some monies on hand. You're going to fundraise and.
Correct. We have money on hand. This is something that this Friday, April 1st, will be my 4-year anniversary within the position. Since day one, this has kind of been on the docket. We recently had passed a bond for a number of projects within the city, within our parks. This was on there. We were going to allocate money from that bond as well. But there's quite a few projects that we're looking at. Food and beverage grant money will help us get to that level of revitalizing Osborne Park.
The amount you get from the city on that bond would probably depend on how much you get from food and beverage.
That's correct.
Okay, which is probably the case with most people. Questions for the Osborne Park softball rehab? Our daughter participated there. Our son refereed, umped there. Same with Little League. Same with out of city AAU. Questions? You had the third highest amount recommended from the advisory committee. So, we good? We're good. Thank you. Appreciate it. Public comment? I think most people here are presenters, not public. We're good to proceed? Okay. Arts Park, Trojan Lane, Destination Development, which I think is the signage, and got the YMCA in this group. So in order, if we have somebody from the Arts Park, if not, someone from Trojan Lane Enhancement, and if not, which was, I think, labeled 1974 because it was mostly the class of 1974. EDC, Destination Development, I think was signage. Anybody want to share? You want to share, Corey? Or
I'd be happy to answer questions.
Corey's here to answer questions. And that's signage around the county for destinations to get people wayfaring in the right direction, knowing what's what. And
Was this the kiosks?
Yes.
Okay.
this is going to be more than one kiosk.
Budget call for 10. To be placed at high traffic locations or high visited locations. And the focus is to cross-sell. So if somebody's visiting, say, the Saddle Club, get a kiosk there, and there'll be community information, other tourist destinations.
So there would be one, maybe several in and around the city limits of Newcastle, and then what, Hoosier Gym or Knightstown,
Yes.
Middletown?
All across the county.
Okay. Would it be someplace that's kind of out there in the hitherlands, like the Wilbur Wright birthplace, the Summit Lake State Park, anything down I-70 and 3, like the Motorsports Park? Chris is here from the YMCA. Oh, Mr. Tarantino. Go ahead.
Simon, you're talking about the money that you want is for exploring where the sign should go, and not the signs themselves. No, we're confusing two different projects here. Okay. The food and beverage request is for signed off on receiving one, but I got a generally good idea of where people will accept them. They would be maintained and kept up to date by my office. Your question was about the county-wide wayfinding program, which is an excellent program, but separate from food and beverage. That's the one I have reservations about. Well, bring that up another time. Sounds good.
And part of the confusion was with my intro, so that's on me. Anything else for Corey before we move to the YMCA? And Chris is here from the Y.
Hello, everybody. The YMCA, our current facility, is just a little bit over 20 years old, which is hard to believe, but and so we're running out of space. Is our problem. We've had to move a lot of things around just to accommodate what we have right now. For example, right now we have a pre-diabetic program going on as we speak, and we've got them in a preschool just because we don't have enough space, and they're walking around toys and so anyway, it's not ideal by any means. And so we're also looking at we've been looking at a program for the last 2 to 3 years. Alliance for Youth had approached the YMCA and also the local school as well, Newcastle schools as well, about trying to increase the amount of before and after school programming for kids. And so Sherry Burgum and I have traveled around the whole state and actually even down to Louisville to look at different programs, both YMCA and programs outside the Y. And so, and we've also had conversations locally. One would be with Boar's Head, and I think all of you saw the presentation, but Boar's Head actually came to the meeting just to let us know for the presentation, just because how much they need the help of trying to have care early in the morning and late at night. And so one of the things we've done already, actually since that meeting, we're doing a trial run right now with Wilburite schools. We have 15 kids, 15 parents have signed up per day there, and so the kids are being dropped off right now at 5:30 a.m. at the Y, and a bus comes and picks them up at 7:30 to take them to Wilburite, be fed, and go to school from there. So that's really the long-term goal. The addition would be approximately $1.5 million, and then it'll be a little bit more than that with a turnaround for the buses to be able to. So the whole idea is the parents would drop them off at 5:30 in the morning, as early as 5:30, and then the bus will come pick them up, take them to school. Afterwards, then the bus would come and actually bring them back to our facility for the after school. And one of the biggest needs is before 6 a.m. and after 6 p.m. And the fact that we're open at 5:30 and we close at 9, we have that capability to do that. So, any questions? So our original request was for $600,000. We're looking at the $300,000, and then we also have a grant out there with Ready as well, hopefully to help support this program as well.
So this is already a program that's in place?
Yes.
In concert with Newcastle?
Just a week, but we started a week before spring break.
These are Newcastle students, pretty much?
They are Newcastle students. So the thought is, if this goes over well, then it's something that we could look at county schools as well.
I also serve on Alliance for Youth, and I know they had an online meeting just this past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They're very keen on this program. I get the impression from that last meeting I attended, there's a great need for working families for this before and after school kind of facility in our county.
So one of the things that we would be able to provide, if school would be canceled, and the kids are already there, then we've got plans for be able to keep those kids there the whole day so the parents don't have to get out of work and things like that. Sorry to interrupt.
Questions for Chris?
Is there a specific piece that you can deliver for the 300,000? I know it was less than what the initial request was, so is that going to give you something enough to finish what you need, or are you holding it until you secure additional financing?
Yeah, far as building on, we've, like I said, we've started the program now, but we're limited for sure on space, what we have. But as far as building the facility, yes, we'd like to at least get pledged. The Ready Grant, we'll find out what happens there and what happens with this, and then we would fundraise to at least get commitments before we even move forward.
And you have the 20% currently match?
We do.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next, do we have reps from Memorial Park, Vets Museum, Wilbur Wright Museum? Start with those three. I'd ask that first. Memorial Park, I think would be for the historic shelter. Veterans Museum had a request of, I think it's one of the least requests of $4,200. Wilbur Wright Museum. Veterans Museum, I bet.
Yes.
Ed
Hill.
Have at it.
We're just asking for $4,205. We're wanting to enhance our security, put in security cameras, get some computer and printer equipment for an office, and to spend a little bit of money remodeling an office. The bulk of the money we're asking for would be for the security cameras. This is equipment that we would install that is actually our match would be in kind, and setting up the recording equipment, same as the computer and the software.
I don't know, $4,200.
I figure with all these big figures running around, that's the change we can pick up off the floor.
And you're doing the labor. I think Councilman Malacote made the comment at our last meeting that some of these they're asking for, $25,000 or less. It's a great impact for their communities. Our main struggle is probably going to be with the $2,500,000, $250,000, but
yeah.
Maybe we can scrounge up $4,200.
I would encourage all of you to come out and visit our museum. We're very proud of it. It's hope to be one of them to match with the other museums in the county. That would just be one of them that would be a destination.
It's a really neat asset to Henry County and the park, and it reinforces the purpose of the park being a war memorial. And I've heard great feedback from folks who've visited. I know that we're having an event next month, and we're bringing the Lieutenant Governor, and a lot of folks are coming in, and we're excited to show her because our event's at the Smith Building. Can you talk to me about, I'm just generally curious, how is attendance when the museum is open? Is it, I know it started a little slow, has it picked up?
Yeah, we've had, I think, we have a registry that people sign. Not everybody signs it, but we've had 120 since last January, so a little over a year and a half. We kind of opened up in May.
Hudson, you just went to
Memorial Day. Yeah.
Go get those on. Okay? Mommy. Do you want me to help you?
Is Hudson with this in jammies?
No matching jammies. They didn't have Hudson size in these. Every couple needs to find something. Like jammies like this?
Anybody know has my phone number? Take a number who'd like to call them and rib them. I would like to say, Ed, I've visited it twice, and it's really a fine representation, for our veterans, and the number of donated items is really impressive.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that we're starting to get some items that have some value, and we would just feel better. I think people that would be wanting to donate items to the museum, they would feel better knowing that we have the security, and that's our concern with this, is just to enhance our security.
Okay. Any other questions for Ed on the Veterans Museum? I think it is an asset for the county. I would agree with what Betsy said.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I think Mr. Frost, are you here for the bicentennial? And then afterwards, the fireworks.
I'm representing the bicentennial. Our effort, we asked for $50,000 initially, and we're thankful of the $25,000 that was approved or suggested by the committee. That $25,000 was going towards the 529 program, which is the college funding for kids in Henry County. Our intent with that is to use the bicentennial as a springboard so that will continue in the future. And this chunk of money with our match will be a good start for them as far as administrative costs and to get all this started out at the foundation, who will be heading that up. The other $25,000 we asked for originally was for promotion, billboards, radio, handout, and the idea of that was to bring more people into the county, because our other, we hope, legacy program is a hoopla festival that we hope will be in the county every year from now on, which will branch off of the branding that we recently came up with of Basketball Lives Here. So our intent with the Hoopla Festival, which will happen this year with a knockout tournament at the Field House, which we hope to break a world record. Our intent with that is for some form of that festival to go on from now on, and that to help fund the 529 program in the future. So we have a good match money in the bank, and we hope that what we do will help tourism, and with the idea of the 529, I think that's a good economic development touch, that just a positive for the county. If you're bringing new business in or people into the county, they think this county cares about the future and their kids, so that's the 529 idea.
If I remember right, both the city and the county provided $25,000 each for the bicentennial. Is that correct, or
I think it's 15.
15 each?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I know when they had the bicentennial for the state of Indiana, I think the legislature budgeted 100 and some odd thousand or million dollars. Yeah, $1 million. So
our state, sure.
Maybe your request is not so outlandish. And the committee, the advisory committee, recommended the half of it, right? The $25,000 for the 529 program.
Yep, and they were impressed with the 529 program.
Okay, I was impressed with watching the video of the.
There you go. I bring my backup singers with me here.
Is he here?
Not here
No?
tonight. No.
I was the only one that brought a guitar and sang.
There you go.
As a promotion. So, questions about the bicentennial? Everybody being, but I have one. What is knockout? I really have not looked it up or Googled it. The basketball.
Knockout is a form of a free throw contest, which is basically the first person shoots, and if he misses, he gets a chance to rebound and hit another shot before the next person behind him hits a free throw. The next person hits his free throw first, he knocks that first person out. So you start with, hopefully we're starting with 800 people, which would be above the record, which is now 701. So we hope that will be a nice PR piece for Henry County to be able to break a world record in the largest field house in the world.
Okay, and sign-ups have begun or going to begin?
Yes, they're just beginning. Online sign-ups,
okay.
Yes.
Scott, I appreciate all the work you and Carrie and the committee have done for the bicentennial. It's really exciting.
Thank you.
It's fun to note that Rush County is also celebrating their bicentennial, and I don't know. It's fun to celebrate history. And I'm curious with the 529. do you have any sense of how many counties in Indiana currently have funds like this?
I don't quote me exactly, but I think it's 12 or 13 that have this program. And it's based through the state. It's called Promise, I believe, through the state. And it sets up the guidelines to do this. And we first thought how this would work and who would administrate it. So we went to the Henry County Foundation, and they researched it thoroughly. And to be honest, they found some counties that were having trouble with it, but found other counties who were very happy and they thought it was a very positive thing to have. So they're going to set up their system based on the ones that are doing well. So they're definitely on board to make this happen.
As we consider future economic development, I would think this is something we would really want to highlight because it's pretty cutting edge. If there's only 12 or 13 counties in the state of Indiana, it's 92 counties. That's another thing that puts us on the map.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Good. All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you came in at number 10 on our countdown of 28. No one here from the fireworks. I think you provided some monies for the fireworks, $35,000. Which was it? Yes, no? No, you did not? You had that discussion at Middletown meeting, I believe. So you did not recommend any. I had that in my notes wrong, if that's correct.
On Monday the 28th, it was in. On Thursday the 3rd, it was out.
Okay. I apparently didn't get my update on my spreadsheet. Okay, so it's currently out, and that makes, maybe it's questionable. Okay, all right. Donations, fundraising, okay. Thank you, Mayor. I think that's a drawing card for our community. People come from far and wide because we have some of the better in East Central Indiana, so that's good to hear. Okay, fireworks. Okay, we're going to go to the county, Knightstown, Middletown, Kennard, Louisville. I have in order on my sheet, we have representatives from Knightstown. And I think one request came through from Knightstown that was approved.
Yes. Good evening, Joe Peacock. First of all, this is such a forward-thinking item that you're doing here, and I just think it's outstanding. Listening to all the different pitches and all of these creative ideas coming from right here within inside our county. You know, hopefully even the ones that may not get funded, maybe that's but can you imagine the outstanding things that are coming in the next 5 to 10 years? And this is part of what gets people thinking, and I just think it's great. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to take up any more of your time on that topic. So,
For the wireless project.
Yes, sir.
So people going through can get connected to what's going on in Knightstown and
yes,
connected.
our proposal is to do, we call it free Wi-Fi, but it's a lot more than that. The purpose of the Wi-Fi program is to extend along US 40. It would also extend onto the square, which would be part of our Knightstown Makers Market that we're putting on the square. We have since been able to go back and talk to, well, actually, they reached out to us. And after our initial pitch, they kind of understood it a little better. So this was a phase 1, phase 2 project. We knew that going into it. 9-Star has actually said, you know, let us take a look at this. Maybe we can contribute a little more to this to where, if funded, we believe we can get 75% of our area covered, where initially we thought it was going to be closer to 50% on the phase 1. And that is due in large part to 9-Star coming forward and offering that up. So we would actually potentially be able to have coverage all the way down to the Hoosier Gym from the square, which would only leave us one corridor from the square down Washington Street, with over 10,000 cars a day, we have a unique opportunity that some communities don't, is to how do we capture some of those people who are driving through and never stopping. And the free Wi-Fi is one beginning piece of that, because we can create a landing page, as most of you may or may not be aware of. Our Knightstown merchants can then post things onto that landing page. So anyone who is going through our community that has that phone on, which I think is everybody these days, we can now target those folks for potential ads, for potential come visit the itty bitty bakery. Facebook proclaims that you can get and expect about a 10% respond rate from your ads in your targeted markets. We're hoping for 1%. That's 100 people a day that could potentially respond from these ads that we can target to them. And when they leave our area, those ads will still keep going for a period of time through that geofencing. Usually it's 2 to 3 days. Imagine for a small community, Middletown, Knightstown, any of the smaller communities around it, that can capture just 100 extra customers a day. That is a huge number for these small businesses along the main streets. This is a game changer. It's also just a little creepy, I do admit, that it's able to do this. And since I found all this out some months ago, I have been watching my phone closer, and wow, people really do that. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but it works because I've responded to some of those ads. The other piece of this is that with the free Wi-Fi, as we saw from the pandemic, we had school buses from Charles A. Beard going out. We're deploying school buses, trying to make sure that all of our kids, or as many as possible, can get this Wi-Fi accessibility in order to be able to do these online classes. As we saw from the current legislation that just got passed, now that's becoming even more stringent, and this connectivity is even more important because there's no longer a low frequency that can work because you have to interact with the teacher so many days now. That requires more bandwidth. By doing the free Wi-Fi, we can now take those 5 or 6 school buses that we are set up to deploy, and we don't need them in this area anymore. Now we can go cover a larger area of our school district and potentially not have kids who are left without the Wi-Fi. Or they can come into town and get it. How great is that we're coming into town to do that?
I think the pandemic says it's pretty incredible they don't have to go into the McDonald's parking lot to do their assignments.
But it's unfortunate as well. We as communities, there are creative ways that we can help lessen that. I'm not saying we can make it all go away. That's just not realistic, but we can lessen it. So this is an exciting program that is way more than just trying to get a potential visitor to Knightstown walking down the sidewalk to get free Wi-Fi. It's just a lot more than that, and we have a lot more thought and a lot more plan for this. The other aspect of it is that now we can put security cameras onto that system. The police department has their ability. Now, they have to spend the money for their private network to go onto there so that it's secure, but this free Wi-Fi that 9 Star is providing will also run those cameras so that we're spending $400 to $500 per camera instead of $3,000 to $4,000 per camera and trying to get those hardwired in. There's so many things the community can do with this, and they're very excited about it, and they're behind it. As you can see from the match, we have businesses that are behind it. We have the town council that I have talked to 3 different town council members who are excited about it. I've got a call set up with one of our town council members and our clerk treasurer to start having discussions on how we do this after year 1 for the sustainability piece. We're not interested in putting this out and at the end of the year going, well, shucks, the money ran out. We want to, that's why the ask is there, because we want that sustainability for the 3, 4, 5 years. That's what we want to be looking at. So in year number 2, let's start talking about how we continue it through year 7 so that we know up front, here's what we're looking at. Prices are only going to go up, so how do we continue to sustain those models? For the sake of, I really appreciate your time a lot, and I can take any questions you have, because I could talk all night.
I've known you as Mr. Housing of southern and southwestern Henry County.
We've got a few houses going over there, yes. We have a few projects going.
apartments, condos, houses.
We've got the flex buildings going on behind CVS. Knightstown's in a unique position that they're looking at through a couple of TIF districts, through some great cooperation through Mr. Murphy and encouragement and advice, to have almost $8 million in increased assessed value in the next 24 months. It is also, please note that in the last 3 years, Knightstown has not seen a population decline, it has seen a population increase, which got Governor Holcomb's attention. 7% and 2% respectively over the last 2 years. So we are growing people. We are not losing students in our school, we're gaining students. Now, it's a slow and steady race. We're not trying to add 100 kids next year into the school. That's not sustainable. We have to grow those 5, 8, 10 students a year, 20 students a year, so that then we can bring them in, we get acclimated to that, and then the next year we're ready to add another 5 or 10.
Not to cut you off, we need to continue a discussion at some other meeting because the things you present are very interesting and forward-thinking. So any questions for Mr. Peacock?
I just want to note, Joe, I really like your passion. Yeah, you think you could sell anything to me. It's obvious how much you love your community, and I appreciate that. As someone who's worked a lot lately on digital literacy on behalf of the county and also supporting rural broadband, I mean, study after study shows that these have incredible return on investment. They really, really do, and especially in an area like ours where accessibility is an issue. You mentioned COVID, of course, economic development, all that. It all goes together. So,
But your dedication to that, if I just may state, is what keeps this moving forward and the dialogue continuing to happen. It is folks like you that understand this piece. It's not a sexy project. It's not. But it is so necessary in today's day and age. It's almost just to the point of being a complete necessity to have that connectivity. Thank you.
Yes, and someday we want to talk to you about housing. Actually, Henry, I think, had the least decline in East Central Indiana counties in the last census, and maybe Knightstown contributed to the fact we lost less than 1%. Some of the counties around us were 4 or 5%. So
surely we celebrated, right?
Yes,
it's
we
exciting.
should have. Yes, of all the 15 East Central Indiana counties, we had the least decline.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll take it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Anyone from Middletown? And I think this was Dietrich Park and you National Register of Historic Places, if I remember correctly.
I'm just here with Dietrich Park.
Okay, go ahead. And they're ADA compliant, I understand. Okay, and you have some monies and you have the match.
Excuse me?
You have the match.
Yes, the league. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Now you can hear me.
It's better.
Sorry.
That happens.
Actually, I turned it off, yeah.
So
But yes, we do have the match between our leagues, our Shenandoah Girls Softball League and the Little League, Cal Ripken League will be splitting the match.
Okay, 48,000, and the committee recommended 48,000.
Yep.
So we'll see what the bonding does and what we have to do with that. But
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I think we're good. Thanks. Thank you. Kennard, the Kennard Crusaders, if I remember correctly.
Hi, my name's Holly Lee. I'm the president and founder of Kennard Crusaders. We started in 2015 as a little blessing box. Our proposal was for a building to call home. It will impact both economic and tourism for the county. Right now, we've put on at least 4 fundraisers, basically in a forgotten township. There's 13 townships in Henry County, and we are ranked 4th, as Kennard being the 4th largest town. So what we need is the building to hold our pantries, which is food, clothing, school supplies, and to help with our fundraisers, help with our community events. We plan on having 13 events. So far, we've had the 4. The biggest one is our car show. This will be the 4th car show that we had coming up. And we anticipate about 1,000 patrons coming through the county throughout the year for the 13 events. As far as economic development for the county, we plan on using the Applebee's Dining to Donate, the 1,000 Degree Pizzas, the bowling alley, the Papa John's trailer coming out to Kennard, and it allows people to pass through Henry County, throughout Henry County, to get to Kennard.
Okay. Holly and I have been talking about another position that we have to appoint, and I talked to Victoria, and we're both thinking we're going to have to try to convince you to reconsider because you're the best candidate for that appointment. You're the only candidate now, but you definitely would. That's off on the subject. Any questions for Holly and the Kennard Crusaders? I was at the meeting up in Middletown when you said that there's some communities that are sometimes overlooked. And you are the 5th largest town city, but the 4th largest town outside of Newcastle. And most people, I don't think, realize Kennard is number 4 out of our 16 incorporated towns and city. Any questions for Holly? And I'll see you about reconsidering afterwards.
Okay.
We'd really like to have you in that position. Okay. Next we have Louisville. Anyone here from Louisville? And that was another small request, as I recall, less than 5,000. But not much. We have someone here from the Expo, and then followed by any other project that did not get recommended that thinks that they have something to share that we need to consider. JR, are you here from the Expo? And then did Kevin, you'd be after JR, and then anybody else. Go ahead. Are you from the Expo?
Yes.
Go ahead, whatever you want to share.
Yes. Okay. Yes, I'm J.R. Martin from the Expo. I guess I'm here to answer any questions that you guys may have about the project. You know, the project's been going on for quite a few years now. We did make a full request in our food and beverage application to finish Phase 2. In our projections of the cost of Phase 2, we had added 25% to each line item that wasn't paid for yet, with the anticipation that construction costs had increased. It was not our understanding that there would be an option to do throttle back request, or it was never asked of us in a public setting, you know, could you take less and what could we get out of less? So after talking with some 4-H leaders and the Expo board, there are some options that we could do for the Phase 2 construction that would allow a place for the 4-H portion of the livestock shows and yearly events to happen. But it would be constructed in a manner that if the community see the need to turn it into the full-fledged Phase 2, it would have that capabilities. So if anybody's got any questions for me, I'd sure take them.
What's the dollar amount for that 4-H piece?
There's two ways we looked at it. We dropped the square footage down. We kept with the steel frame construction, and then we also looked at a wood frame construction. Let me just pull this up so I don't quote it wrong. And please understand these are estimates. If we went to a 100 by 275, which would be the center portion of the original building that we had proposed, steel frame construction, bare bones, we was looking at around 1.7. And that's with a gravel parking lot instead of an asphalt parking lot. If we went to a wood frame style construction of a 120 by 275, you're looking at about 1.5. Still bare bones. I mean, you'd have your lights and you know, just it would have all the amenities of our current fairgrounds just updated.
JR, when you and I sat down last year to talk about funding for the expo, I'd mentioned to you that I thought it would be really wise, given all the federal funding, grant funding right now that's available, that you and your team would consider pursuing that. What's the current status of seeking grants?
We did have an application in for the READY grant. A lot of the council members that I had talked to at that time all recommended us to do so. It's my understanding that the local READY committee has already selected the 3 projects that Henry County is going to submit to the region, and we were not one of those 3 projects.
And you and I had also talked, I thought it might be a really good idea for the group to pursue hiring a grant writer who could go for specific, funding mechanisms. Is there an update on that?
Since you and I have talked, I think that we have applied for 3 grants, the food and beverage being one of them. We did not have to hire a grant writer at this time, but as you all know, our fundraiser has left town. She's no longer with us. So we have a board member that is pursuing conversation again with a fundraiser to help us go forward in traditional fundraising and grant writing applications.
Right. I think it would be really wise for your group to consider a professional grant writer. You can build it into the cost of the grant.
We're never going to find one as cheap as Kathy, but, we understand that.
My understanding, when I sat down, I think Harold and me sat down with you, that there was an application for a Lilly grant, and that a couple years ago, and that was not successful.
Correct. We did not receive any of the fundings for the Lilly grant. The Lilly grant came through the Community Foundation, and the Community Foundation had hired a professional grant writer at that time to write the grant for us. And at that time, that is why we went away from the larger building to the smaller building at the request of the foundation, because that aligned us for the Lilly grant better. We felt like it was a good application, but it just didn't work out in our favor at that time.
So it was that grant writer suggested you do the Phase 1 and instead of the larger 4-H livestock building?
I think there was more input from just the grant writer. I think it was, how all that stuff works. There's a team of people working together, and it was brought to our attention that if we would change up our construction schedule, that it would align ourselves for that Lilly grant, which that Lilly grant had the capabilities of fully funding the whole project at the time.
Is it my understanding from watching your video that you have monies to complete the current building that's out there half constructed on hand or not, Phase 1?
At the time of the food and beverage application and the time of the interviews, we did feel like that we had the funds secured to build the first building. The sprinkler system, the HVAC, and the electrical all came back over the allowance that was in the construction bid. So we are short on funds right now at this time.
When you look at the building, it looks like there's still a need for a floor, windows, siding. Are these things already covered with monies that you have?
Yes, ma'am. Right now, the HVAC guys out there running the first line of the ductwork and things for the mechanical. Once he's done, then we will be pouring the concrete floor. And once the concrete floor is secure, or settled, or, secured, that's the word I'm looking for. Once the concrete floor is secured, we put the windows and doors in and things like that.
And what about the classrooms?
We have all the lumber for the framing of the interior room space as well already locked in.
And so the cost to construct them is included?
Correct. Really, it was those three line items. In the construction bid, they had allowances that went towards them, and the material costs for those three things have dramatically went up. We did have the contractor double check with another sprinkler company because the original sprinkler company that he was going to use was tremendously higher, and he was able to find a sprinkler company that would bring it back down into a more reasonable level.
So how much short are you to complete phase one, do you think, given the higher estimates that's gone up, the price increases? Can you still do it by 4-H time? I know the indoor displays and those items are for the phase one, are they not?
Correct. We haven't had it on the docket to have it done by this year's 4-H. We do feel like that it could be done by the end of the summer, as long as supplies are able to come in through his vendors. I would estimate that we're going to be around 192 to 200,000 short, which is one of the reasons that we reached out to the fundraiser that we had worked with through our feasibility study to talk to her about ideas and opportunities that she would have as well.
So you think you're about $200,000 short of completing phase one? Other questions for JR?
I have a question. So if the 4-H piece was something we wanted to go forward with, the scaled down version, how does that lay out there? Is it still just right beside the first building, or?
Yeah, for instance, if we went with the steel frame construction style building, it would still butt right up next to the breezeway. And then that would allow further space to the south for additional square footage if 4-H ever needed it or the community ever needed it to grow into. The wood frame building that we had a price on was actually it's a duplicate building of, I think it was Johnson County had built a facility like this, and that's where we had pulled the data from that. And it had shorter sidewalls, so we may just have to just do like a covered walkway, breezeway in between the two buildings to make the transition better. We didn't really give it a lot of time and thought until we, knew whether or not you guys liked the idea of that and it was worth pursuing. But that is a road that we're willing to go down. I do want to clarify from an earlier comment that the first building that we're building is never intended to play basketball in or sports that require a high ceiling. I mean, it would be big enough that you could wrestle in or anything where the height wasn't an issue. It was always the second phase construction that had the center in it large enough for 3 basketball courts. But we never had it as part of our sustainability that we were going to be a sporting complex. We was just showing the community that is something that could happen in the facility if they wanted it to.
And you did have a feasibility study that indicated that if you complete phase one and phase two, it would be financially feasible and sustainable over time.
Yeah, we've had, there's 21 livestock shows that have already reached out to us that want to bring their show to Henry County, and then there's probably additional 15 or so other trade shows and style activities that would like to come. Estimated first year income off of just the people that have reached out to us and said we want to bring our business to Henry County is 33,000 people. I always use the number of $28 per person because that was what Penn State University said. I checked the number with Corey Murphy at the EDC, and he thought that was an accurate number of impact of dollars spent in the community for an event center. And I would like to say that was, I think it was 12% of the usable weekends for the large building, and around 15 or 20% for the small buildings. So there was plenty of room to grow in that. Our 5-year projection shows this project putting $5 million back into the local businesses at the $28 per person mark.
I asked earlier to see kind of a professional breakdown feasibility from the sports park. Do you have that you can share with me, that I can share with the council if they so ask? Whatever study you had, feasibility study, cost estimates, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think you guys have seen the one that Total Dynamic Solutions did before. It was the study on fundraising before we started the fundraising process that kind of took the temperature of the community. She interviewed close to 100 different what we thought were community leaders or people of the community that had influence. And, so that was kind of where we got the estimates of that this project does have the capabilities to fundraise. And then our projections as far as the sustainability, I'd be more than glad to share that with you. I've shared it with you guys actually before. And each one of those customers have agreed with me and have submitted their telephone number, and they said that the county council can call them to check the legitimacy of their show and their request to come to Henry County.
Okay. As you know, the advisory committee did not recommend anything for the expo. So you're going to be $200,000 short on phase 1, and the lowest on is 1.5 million is the lowest, and that's a wood structure for phase 2. And that's just the construction of the building, materials and labor.
It would be the construction of the building, concrete inside the building with some concrete outside of the building for a place for trailers to land. The electrical, the plumbing for the wash racks. We'd be using the bathrooms in the breezeway. They're 10 times the bathrooms that we have at the current fairgrounds. And it would be a gravel parking lot.
Okay.
We estimated the gravel parking lot at 8 inches of stone with our cost of crushed stone from IMI that they give us, and then the labor to put it down.
Any other questions?
I have one more question. If the first building is completed, phase 1, and then the 4-H grounds go up, how do you see sustainability of that first building by itself without the second building?
The events are a lot different in the 2 buildings. Some of the events that were coming, off the top of my head, I could think of 3 that wanted to rent the whole complex. They wanted to have training seminars going on in the classroom while they had a trade show going on in the other 2 buildings. So if we just got the first building done, obviously you're going to lose all of your livestock shows that were coming to the area. But your smaller, I'll give you an example. There was a Rock and Gym Festival that reached out to us. And she said in the beginning, she felt like that the small building would be more than sufficient enough to start that trade show for everything that goes along with that, which I'm not an expert in. But she said, in a 5-year plan, she could see needing to move into the large building. So there will be some of those scaled back.
What's the capacity of the first building?
It's 500 round table and 750 classroom style.
I know my wife's close friends with a junior class sponsor at the high school and has helped with several proms. They've been having a hard time finding venues, suitable venues. I used to go to Blue Falls. I went to the Horizon Center, and that fell through. Blue Falls and Pendleton ceased existence or quit operating. So they have great interest in the facility that would easily accommodate 500 people.
And we always had the thought in our mind that when this project was fully completed, that especially our local county schools, if they wanted to use that for prom and post-prom, that would be something that we would do at a good reduced rate. Please don't ask me what that reduced rate would be because I have no idea. But that is something that we see as value because when I did prom when I was in high school, we may have went to Anderson for prom and we may have went to Muncie for post-prom. And if you could do everything underneath one roof, then you lessen the chance of late night accidents happening during the prom season.
Any other questions for JR and the expo? And Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think Kevin Ritchie was here, correct? Is that for a project that was not funded? I remember seeing your video, Kevin, but remind us what the project is.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. It's for the Welcome Center in Knightstown. And possibly Landon and Corey can chime in. I wasn't at all the previous meetings. I went to the one in Middletown, and I was under the understanding that this Welcome Center project and also a billboard for the Hoosier Gym, who I'm not representing for that, but they wanted me to bring that up, that those were on the list. And I didn't see it on your list tonight, but
Knightstown Tourism Office?
Yes.
Is that the one you're
Yes.
representing?
Uh-huh.
Okay, what would you like to say?
Well, we're asking for $5,280. That would cover the rent for 1 year, and it is on the public square. We have the storefront there. It's right next door to the museum, the Knightstown History Museum, in the center of town, right next to the forthcoming Makers Market area. We feel that we're in the southwestern part of the county, and we have a lot of tourists that come in and visitors for the Hoosier Gym, but we want to draw them to the rest of our community and then also to the rest of the county.
Who owns the building? I think part of the question that we had our attorney tell us, if it's a private building and it's for things like rent, it would not qualify under the legislative act for food and beverage. Is it rent for a private building?
It is owned by by David, but yeah, it's private.
That's why it was not accepted, I think. We asked that, I think, of the Rose City game and of your building, and it came back from our attorney that would be an issue given what the Indiana Code is convoluted as that law is. It was pretty clear on food and beverage monies could not be used for that purpose.
Okay.
And that's why, I think that's why it did not get recommended legally.
Okay. And then I was also wanting to bring up for the Hoosier Gym about their billboard.
Okay.
We have that project, and I don't have the information on that, but
I remember viewing it on the video, and again, it was just one of those things. I was at the Middletown meeting, and it just didn't make the cut. And maybe that's enough said.
I see, Kenan, that both of those made the 1.2 million recommendation and then were removed from the 4.4. Most of them went over, but then there was some switching, so.
And I think that was, Corey tried to cover that, and it was difficult to reconcile the two, the 4.4 versus the 1.2, and some decisions had to be made. But I think they came exactly to 1.2 and 4.4. We since found we don't have that much money, so something would have to be cut or trimmed down on that 4.4 recommendation, given the increase in interest rates since last August. So I think a big decision the council is going to have to make is to bond or not to bond, and if so, at what amount and how much do we want to save back for kind of a rainy day? That's not the proper term, but hold back for other projects. Thank you, Kevin. That's the reason, the rationale. We got that from our attorney. And we have Jeff Ray, and that would be on the Honeybee Trail Project. Jeff?
So I know whenever I made my presentation, the question was asked, if you could receive less funding than our request of $848,000. And at that time, I answered that question no, because it was a $1.1 million project to connect Wilburite to Memorial Park as well as Raintree Heights. Since that time, after all the meetings, I had a conversation with Perry Knox he's a bridge consultant that the Highway Department utilizes, one of the two that they contract with, and that is SJCA. And he had read the infrastructure bill that was passed last year and saw that if we had shovel-ready projects, and with the climate, there was some climate funding in there, reduction of CO2, and this with trail projects, then if you were able to do design and engineering to allow the project to be shovel-ready, then you would be eligible to apply for some of that federal funding. So within our project, there is $140,000 for the bridge design and engineering and permits, and there's $65,000 for the design and engineering for the trail. So that's a total of $205,000. We do have the 20% for that through regional cities as well as funds that Healthy Communities already has. So our request would be at this point as a reduce to be able to do the preliminary design and engineering for the project of about $165,000 then. Yeah, 160 to 165,000.
Okay.
So I wanted to bring that back before the council because that wasn't something that I didn't answer. You know, I didn't know that at the time during the interview as well as even after they were making their deliberations on recommendations.
So it goes through that federal infrastructure bill, and there's still no guarantee, but you would have to have the engineering and design prior to even submitting an application for that.
So the first box is it shovel ready? If we had the design and engineering done for the bridge as well as the trail, then that does allow us to move through the other requirements that are asked for in that infrastructure bill.
So the long and short is you're able to go forward with far less than $848,000 in your initial request.
Exactly.
Council? Questions? Going. Thank you, Jeff.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, 165,000 sounds maybe more palatable than 848,000. But not as palatable as $4,205 for the Veterans Museum. And we'd go to Memorial Park and some of them would stop by the Veterans Museum. Yeah, more traffic, thank you. Anyone else like to comment? Yes, Travis from Rose City Game.
Thank you. Travis White, representing Rose City Game Library. I thank you for the explanation of why we were dropped, and we understood that that was a possibility. The committee explained that they were concerned about that as well. I just, on behalf of the Board of Directors, I wanted to thank the committee for their work and to the council for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you. And I'll take this opportunity to thank you and the paper for great coverage. And Landon's here. He wasn't here at the last meeting on the 18th. He had a conflict. Thank you both again, Corey and Landon, for heading up that committee. You went above and beyond, I think, what the expectations were for your committee's work. So thank you again for that. And Corey may have comments.
I know it's late. You're tired. I'm tired. I'm not here to advocate for one project or another. I'm here to encourage you to bond. There are several counties across this state that do not have food and beverage. They don't have this tool. Baker Tilly has structured it in a fiscally responsible, safe manner. As a practical implication, it's essentially the same bond as in 2012 and 2016. They're using a different statute to accomplish the same objective. The 2012 bond, the 2016 bond were both backed by property taxes. When you all issued debt for the jail, you backed it with everything in the kitchen sink, including your local income taxes. Phenomenal project. You had to do it. Appreciate you doing it. You're going to celebrate the grand opening this week. Be bold. We're asked all the time, and you ran because you wanted to do good things for Henry County, or you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't sit through these meetings. What can we do to make Henry County better? What can we do to attract and retain talent? Well, I can tell you, sitting in the advisory committee, it's the enthusiasm from all across the county that really impressed me. And you look at every application, and it's backed by several people. I'm going to go out on a limb that close to 500 people across our county have touched these projects. Some of you, your margin in your elections was much less than 500 people. Okay? So what I'm telling you is your constituents have spoken. They participated in this process, and they're asking you to invest in their enthusiasm. Is it an easy decision? It's not. It's not an easy decision. But be bold and invest in Henry County. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. And again, thank you, committee. Thank you, everyone who showed up here tonight. At the bottom of the handout we do have another meeting. Corey, I think on the 5th, April 5th, 6 p.m. here, regarding Boar's Head expansion, which is another exciting project coming to the county. We have to do some legal and financial things regarding that. This Thursday, we have our 3:30 March meeting that was moved back because a couple of council members had conflicts last week. So that's 3:30 in here this Thursday. Anyone from the public come to comment on any projects? Commissioner Tarantino, you're up. You have 7 minutes before Zoom goes off.
Yeah, I know it's late. What I'm going to say, I wrote this afternoon. It may sound like I'm against the sports complex, which I am not. I am a physical education guy. I am for sports. I hauled my kids all over the state to play sports, and I would like nothing better than to have just hauled them to Newcastle to play sports. But I did write a statement I would like to read. I want to urge you to reconsider some of the recommendations that were given to you by the Food and Beverage Advisory Committee. And I also would like to say that that committee did an excellent job. I went to several of those meetings, and they had a tough task, and they handled it very well. I believe that a very small group of individuals have been able to exert influence on a particular project that is over and above what should have been their sphere of influence. The project I speak of is the Expo Center, which is currently under construction in Memorial Park. This project is ideally suited for food and beverage tax revenue, and Representative Tom Saunders, who was instrumental in obtaining this tax for our county, agrees with me on this. So many of the allegations made against that project have been distorted or not, or are just completely untrue. The Expo is and has always been a project designed to increase tourism throughout Henry County. It was always meant to be far more than just a venue for 4-H exhibitions. The uses for this facility are many and versatile. The planners have developed a plan with 3 sets of estimates for the financial viability of the project, all of which put the expo in the black once it is completed. All profits from the facility have always been planned to maintain the facility and to enhance and improve Memorial Park and possibly other community projects. I've failed to see the logic of awarding almost $1 million to a sports complex that has not been started yet, and nothing at all to the Expo Center that is already underway. The same complaining voices that have spoken against the Expo, I think, would be having a field day with the logic being applied to the sports complex. It is a $16 million project, no guarantees of future profits other than the estimates that the Expo has the same thing. The money to complete the project is not on hand, and the project that it is modeled after is in another county is not meeting its expectations. With some cooperation, and this may be impossible, I don't know, but there may be a way to create some sort of hybrid of the 2 projects, the Expo and the Sports Center. I don't know if that's possible, but I did not understand that as a county council, you could justify supporting a sports complex without equal or greater support for the Expo. I certainly appreciate the work that was done by the Food and Beverage Committee, but I would also appreciate the council acknowledging the effort that has already gone into the Expo project. The county will play a role in the completion of the project or the failure to complete the project, either way. Your predecessors all voted support for the Expo. I don't feel this is a good time to abandon it. Thank you.
Thank you. Not wanting to cut anyone off, but I know you timed the Zoom to go off at 8:45, and we paid to 8:45. Anyone else like to comment, or are we already off? Okay. Any other closing comments? Any council member like to make a closing comment? Yeah, we're losing a Zoom, so anything public, I don't. Any other comments?
She said we can still keep our meetings going.
Okay.
The Zoom is just an addition to the public meeting.
Okay.
I've heard good feedback from constituents about the possibility of us allocating money to the historic shelter house at the park. And it occurs to me that, I mean, the park is county-owned, and I don't know. I've heard good feedback on that, and I think it might be a wise investment for us to invest in the park that, you know, we take care of.
And that was added, I think, from the committee as an add-on if monies, or we'd have to cut something else lower depending on the amount of body, but that was an asterisk add-on as a possibility they'd recommend.
Yeah, I might be hearing from the same folks, but I've also heard quite a bit of feedback about that. And as someone who's actually served as the park board president and been to that facility many times, and I'm sure most of us in the room have, it is a phenomenal building, and it would be a shame to let it go. It has a ton of potential and could be a great draw, and it has been. I mean, everybody in this room has been to a birthday party, a wedding, anniversary, or something there. I mean, the park had a great Christmas program a couple years ago, 2-3 years ago. I wasn't able to make it, but I heard phenomenal feedback. I think I saw pictures of Ed there. And so, I mean, I agree. I think that's something that I'm getting a lot of feedback from several folks out there. Not to belittle the committee and their decisions, but I think I think the park has been plagued by some turmoil, if you will, to put it mildly, lately, and now in the middle of not having a superintendent to kind of come and fight for that, and just several moving parts. So I think we shouldn't hold that against them, and we should definitely, I would be more than willing to discuss that as a potential funding option.
Okay, thank you. From the south side, anything over here? Anything else from the north side?
Just going to say that I also would like to see the shelter house done. I asked several different people what their top 3 needs were at the park, and I asked people that don't even like each other, you know, all these different groups of people all over that have been fighting about the park for a long time. They all said the shelter house. They all said the ponds. The pond, you know, the pond needs to be dredged. And so just putting it out there, I'd like to see the shelter house done, and with the possibility of improving the pond as well.
Not to speak for the ARP committee, but some of that is applicable under ARP as well. Parks, those kind of things are part of it.
The other thing I would like to bring up to the council is I think we should, you know, I think it makes sense to consider bonding. I'm much more amenable to the 150% coverage, because as Harold, which I don't believe I see him here right now, brought up in our last meeting, I am concerned about where we're headed. Afraid feds are raising interest rates. We have a huge inflation issue in this country, and I'm afraid we may be in for one of those recessions. And if we dip into those numbers from back in that 7, 8, 9 period, and people stop eating out because they got to put gas in their tanks and, you know, are shopping a whole lot cheaper at Aldi's and Walmart to feed their family, I think we could see a significant decline in the food and beverage revenue. And especially since with what we're committing to, I mean, I know that Jason said earlier, it's not affecting a tax rate, but we are literally going to sign a piece of paper that says if we can't pay the bill, we're going to institute a new tax, because we're backing this with a property tax. So, I mean, we're backing this with a tax hike that we could have to institute. I will not be here because this is my last year on the council, but this council will have to act in some facet to pass a tax or whatever way they have to pay the bill, because we can't default on a loan. And so I do think, I agree with Corey. I think we've got an excellent opportunity to fund several projects. And I mean, here's the beauty of this. If we add the 1.3 plus million we have on hand, plus the 150% number, which I'm trying to get to, which is 3.8, that puts us over $5 million, folks. That's still more than the 4.4 million that the committee brought to us.
So you're suggesting use monies on hand?
I am.
Plus the 150%.
I think the monies on hand, to me, and this is just my suggestion to the body, that we consider funding those smaller projects that are on the committee's 1.2 list, because in talking and viewing the videos, nearly every single one of these projects are shovel ready. They could literally put a shovel in the dirt tomorrow. Mike could start on the ball diamonds tomorrow. You know, Scott could take the money and put it directly to the bicentennial tomorrow. The monies could be applied. Chris, he's got some planning to do, a little bit. Not much. Greg's in the same boat. If we push the bigger projects to the bond discussion, then that to me logically makes some sense. And that, I mean, this is just me throwing it out there, as that would, I mean, the expo, obviously they've got some things going, but they've still got a lot to move, but to get the whole project done. So to me, I think, again, everybody knows me as the numbers guy on the council. I feel a whole lot more comfortable at that 150% mark. But the great news is that still puts us well over the 4.4 million that we initially had projected. And the money we have on hand, we still have, if we commit the money we have on hand that we still have enough to cover all of those bond debt services. That doesn't affect those. That 1.375, I think the number is that about, give or take, right, Debbie? Is that somewhere in that number? I mean, that money's on hand. We make up about $60,000+ a month on average. So for the rest of the year, we'll add to that $60,000+ a month that will, before we even see the debt servicing, which will kick in January. So on top of what we have, we're still going to build an additional cushion of, $500,000 that will be there on top of that. So again, this is just Chad's opinion, and I'm throwing it out there. So thank you for letting me speak.
I remember when Jason spoke to us before our first budget hearing in 2019 that we had very little monies as far as a balance. And it was less than 3% when he first met. And he said, we recommend a minimum of 15% balance on hand. And said, you guys are precariously close of not making payroll. And that was in the summer of 2019. And the last we had a meeting with Paige and Jason, it was 18%. So we were actually above what they recommended. So we've sharpened the pencil and made some cuts and made some alterations, but we're not nearly against the walls we were 3 years ago. So that's good. And we've got a jail that we're going to open up on open house on Wednesday. So that can had been kicked down the road for 12 years. And the price in that 12 years went from 5.5 to 25 million. Same's going to happen with these projects they're recommending. So it's going to do nothing but go way up. So I agree on the bonding. I hope we consider bonding very strongly. It does not really affect the tax rate unless things go tremendously south. And if it goes that far south, the country's got more problems than what we can handle. We're going to continue, I believe, we're going to have to continue this discussion at our meeting on Thursday, so please put that on the itinerary. Food and beverage continued from Monday because we really need to tackle the bonding. Because everything else depends on the bonding. Yay, nay, and how much. So I think, looking over to the south again, I don't want to ignore you.
So I'm sorry, I interrupted the south end. I don't want to do that. Do we want to potentially come ready to create a cash funding list and then come ready to discuss a bonding project list?
I think if we don't, we're going to be stuck on the home plate and never hit anything out and go from there. I think we're stuck if we don't start that discussion, don't you?
I agree. I agree with your opinion on coming up with a bond and whether or not we're going to do it. But I also think we need to look at each project independently and vote based on those projects and where the numbers come, because it's going to be very difficult to vote as a package because, as Betsy's mentioned, she has strong feelings about the park. Susan's mentioned strong feelings about the park. I'm not sure if Peg or Kyle have anything on their list, or you, that are different. I mean, most of mine is very much in line with what the committee brought forth. I do have a question, and I was really hoping that the Trojan Lane project was here tonight, because one of the major things that concerned me about that project is the fact that they're not sustainable. They're asking for the committee to actually sustain them by providing a fund in the community foundation. And I think that's counterintuitive for what was brought forward at first. They're wanting us to fund basically a trust down there for them to pay for their future sustainability, and I have a concern with that. So, Mr. Murphy?
Yes, go ahead. Are you responding to that comment? Okay.
So, Landon, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Trojan Lane project was one of the projects that we reduced. And the reduction, what went away in the reduction is the endowment.
It went from 200 to 150.
Yeah, the endowment, according to the video, unless I misunderstood, was $100,000 of it was going into the endowment. They'd only reduced $50,000.
when I talked to Lynn, emailed Lynn and talked to Lynn, I said, can you complete the project with the recommended reduction? And he said, yes. What would go away is any money going into the endowment.
Because what he said on the video was 100, if you go back and look at it, and what was actually, and the reduction's only 50, so that still leaves $50,000 plus for an endowment.
Yeah, and for the record, he's out of state or he'd be here.
Sure, I understand, and that's why so that's questions that that's why I think we have to look at each project independently instead of bulk everything together, because there are some unanswered questions like that we don't have tonight. I had some unanswered questions on the wireless project, which Joe did a great job of filling me in tonight. Even, I watched the presentation, it was great, but I still, me, I overanalyze sometimes. And so I had some questions which got filled in, but that's one that I would like to get filled in, because I think, every other project that even the presentations we've had tonight have all said that this is how we're sustainable, this is why we're sustainable. This one says, we want you to make us sustainable. And I have a bit of a concern with that.
Chad, I'm glad you brought that up. Corey, I actually have a follow-up question for you. You're running away from the mic. The class of 1974 it was an impressive presentation. I guess I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around how the Trojan Lane project represents economic development.
So the way they pitched the project and the way I understand the project is, it is Trojan Lane in Newcastle and Fort Henry County is really a street that is heavily traveled, 5 visitors, and so it's a first impression. And so improving the landscaping, it's a streetscape project. And first impression for visitors and residents.
So as much tourism as anything?
Yes.
So Ken, I think what Chad was suggesting was we take this long list, the all projects sorted by score, and vote on them with a dollar amount one at a time. Is that what? So is that what you want us to all come ready to do Thursday? Okay.
I agree. To respect the committee, I like the idea of starting at the top and going down, just like the committee presented it to us in the scoring, and start at the top and go down, and then we just have to make decisions as we go.
Peggy.
Yes, I want to thank everybody, first of all, for all the time that's been put into this. And what I'm going to say might make some upset. I'm old school, I guess. When I ran for this position, I had my mind set that we would do whatever we could do to provide for citizens their needs, not necessarily their wants. I've heard some really good things tonight. I've looked over the packet, and I can tell you every project is a good project. It's not that it's not good. But after sitting here and listening to you speak, I can think of 4 right now that really are on the top of my list. And those 4 actually fulfilled a need of the citizen. Not the want, not the fun times. I saw them as a personal endeavor to help people. And I really like that. So yeah, we have a lot to discuss. And I'm also old school in the fact that I am not one that believes you need to borrow money just so you can spend more. I have a hard time signing on that dotted line. I've never, ever lived my life that way as a child in my parents' home or in my married life. So I find that very difficult for me to grasp. And I know it's done all the time, but I will tell you right now, I personally am not for bonding. To me, that's just borrowing money so we can spend more money. And that makes no sense to me. Because down the road, the way things are going, we may not have people coming to restaurants. We may not have restaurants open. We don't know. And until things stable out, I just think it's not a wise thing to do. So, but I look forward to more discussions. And I really appreciate all the time that's been spent. But I guess my priorities are kind of in a different place. But thank you all.
Thank you, Peggy, for your honesty. Anyone else before we? Anyone from the audience? Thank you. We spent 3+ hours and much more going into those presentations in February, so thank you so much. Anything else, council, before take a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
So moved and see you at the jail open house ribbon cutting. See you Thursday at 3:30.